Chapter 215. Yi Wudao. Exist. Yi Wudao, who was kneeling at His Highness, lowered his head, and there was no arrogance on his face, only the happiness of the rest of his life. Since the suzerain is interceding for you and I will recite your father's credit, this time you will be exempted from the death penalty. Hear this. Yi Wudao heaved a sigh of relief, and his whole body almost collapsed. He hurriedly kowtowed to the sect master of Qinyuan Sword Sect. Thank you, sect master. However, the death penalty can be avoided, and the living crime cannot be escaped. The hall master of Jinhai Palace paused. Since you are punished to be banned from Cangzhou Xianqing for 100 years, if you can't do it, then you will be punished to kneel outside Yunxiao Palace until the day when Zhenangwen is recovered. The words fall. The hall master of Jinhai Palace stretched his finger a little. Yi Wudao's body flew out of the hall uncontrollably. Next moment, he was oppressed by a space cage and knelt outside the Yunxiao Palace, unable to move. Everyone's consciousness swept away. Seeing the outside of the Yunxiao Palace, Yi Wudao couldn't speak, couldn't move, and knelt outside the palace like a sculpture. The corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. As expected of the hall master of Jinhai Palace, what a shame. The third elder Yi Yin, who had always looked indifferent, saw this scene, and his fingers could not help but curl slightly. Seeing that Yi Wudao was punished, the sect master of Qinyuan Sword Sect said slowly, since everyone has no objection to this military feat, then continue to reward. After she finished speaking, she glanced at the palace master of Ganyun Palace. Yes, sect master. The master of the Qinyun Temple bowed his hands, then looked at Qin Daoxian and other Cangzhou cultivators and said, Cangzhou cultivators have made great contributions to the extermination of the corpse tide. According to the merits, you can choose the following rewards. Say it. The master of Qinyun Temple waved his black robe, and a light curtain appeared. On the light curtain, numerous resource rewards appeared in front of everyone. Zhou Mubai shrank slightly when he saw the exchangeable resources. As expected, Qin Daoxian saw the large transport ship of Qinyuan Jianzong in this light curtain. Of course, the exchange price is very high, and it takes millions of great efforts to exchange one. The exchange price is horrible though. But if it weren't for a special reason, Qinyuan Jianzong would not usually take out such a large transport ship. Qinyuan Jianzong's large transport ship can not only transport goods, but also carry people, and its carrying capacity is amazing. Normally, a large transport ship can be worth at least 100,000 ordinary cargo ships sold by the Yang family shipping line, and the flight speed is very fast. Although it is not comparable to the Spirit Void battleship, it is not much slower than the ordinary Zifu cultivator when sailing at full speed. Thus, from Guang'an Prefecture to Xun Prefecture, it only takes 2 days at most. Even if Cangzhou was the two farthest houses, it would take less than 10 days for this large transport ship to make a trip. With it, the monks in Cangzhou can completely establish a transportation network in Cangzhou. Once the traffic problem is solved, commerce will naturally prosper. The most important thing is that the monks in Cangzhou can get rid of the influence of Cangzhou Xianqing. See these kinds of rewards that are usually hard to see. The Cangzhou cultivators did not lose their heads, but immediately took out a large sum of military exploits and chose the large transport ship that was most important to them at the moment. Qin Daoxian is no exception. Although the other treasures given by the master of Qinyun Palace made him very envious. But compared to the development of the family, those treasures are nothing at all. During this Cangzhou corpse tide, Qin Daoxian killed nearly 100 million corpses. According to an average of 10 small gongs for a zombie, he has accumulated more than 1 billion small gongs in total, that is, tens of millions of major gongs. The reason why he has more than 1 billion small work is because the zombies he killed are not all the lowest rank zombies, but also the zombies with the strength of building foundation and even Zifu. Destroying enemies of different strengths will naturally result in different merits. Among all the monks, Qin Daoxian has won the most military exploits. After exchanging 10 large transport ships in a row, Qin Daoxian stopped. The other Cangzhou cultivators in the group also exchanged various large transport ships. Even if a certain cultivator's military exploits are insufficient, everyone will pool the exploits together to exchange them. Totally counted. The Cangzhou cultivators exchanged a total of 96 large transport ships. Among them, Guang'an House has the largest number, reaching 16 ships. See everyone choose the reward. The sect master of Qinyuan Sword Sect nodded. Since this is the case, today's palace meeting will end here. Hearing this, many Yuanying monks bowed to the Qinyuan Jianzong sect master together and said, "This subordinate retire." Say it. The figures of everyone disappeared directly in place, and only a few people remained, turning into light and leaving. Before leaving, the master of the refining hall waved his hand, and a pitch-black ancient card appeared in front of Qin Daoxian. If you are free, come to my Tianshu Peak and sit down. After that, Hu Yanqi's figure disappeared. Qin Daoxian took the black ancient card, looked at it, and put it in the storage bag. He knew that those who suddenly disappeared were all the incarnations of the true monarchs of nascent soul, and only those who escaped were the true monarchs of nascent soul who came to attend the palace meeting. It's normal to think about. Although the Yuanian cultivator said that his lifespan is long, he spends a lot of time cultivating and comprehending the Tao on weekdays, so how can he have an empty body to participate in a small reward? Can send a mana incarnation or see the real person of Xinjue being destroyed, come and watch the excitement. As for these Zhangzhou cultivators, apart from the epiphany in front of Qin Daoxian Hall, they gave everyone a small surprise. There was no more turbulence in the hearts of the people. But even Qin Daoxian, he is only amazingly talented in the way of refining. After all, no matter how powerful the refining tool is, the increase in its own strength is limited. Besides, they didn't think they would have the day when they would ask Qin Daoxian to help them refine their weapons. After all, no matter how talented Qin Daoxian is, he is now just a foundation-building cultivator. If you want to make the temple masters and elders present squarely, nascent soul cultivation base is the minimum. And it has to be a nascent soul cultivator with a very high realm. Just when everyone was leaving, the voice of the hall master of Jinhai Palace suddenly sounded, "Qin Daoxian, you stay." "Yes, hall master." Qin Daoxian froze in his heart, but he still bowed and saluted and stopped. The other Zhangzhou cultivators looked at each other in dismay, and immediately surrendered to the master of Jinhai Palace. Now, in the huge Yunshao Palace, only Qin Daoxian and Jinhai Palace were left. Qin Zhan looked at Qin Daoxian with interest and then smiled. "Qin Daoxian, you are giving me more and more surprises." Heard. Qin Daoxian lowered his head humbly. "I treat Yi Wudao like this and you may be dissatisfied." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian's heart tightened and then he said calmly, "There is indeed dissatisfaction." "Haha," the hall master of Jinhai Palace laughed. "Yes, I thought you would say something against your heart." He paused. "I know the hatred between you Zhangzhou cultivators and Yi Wudao. However, if Yi Wudao's backing doesn't fall, he can't kill him." Hear this. Qin Daoxian was silent. He knew that the hall master of Jinhai Palace was right. Yi Yin would not die, and the elder faction of Qinyuan Jianzong would not disintegrate. Killing Yi Wudao would only cause endless trouble. Don't say that he is not Yi Wudao's opponent. Even if his strength exceeds Yi Wudao, he cannot kill. After all, he didn't have any backers in Qinyuan Jianzong, so he could stop Yi Yin's revenge. You're thinking, why didn't I just kill Yi Wudao? Seeing that Qin Daoxian didn't speak, Qin Zhan sighed. "We don't want to kill him because we don't want to irritate Yi Yin. Now the war on the front line of Izumo is getting more and more anxious, and the underwater world of Wangxinghai is not calm. Qinyuan Jianzong cannot be in civil strife at this time." Speaking of this, Qin Zhan seemed a little irritable, waved his hand and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about this. Last time I promised you a reward in Xinjue Immortal Mansion, and I can't give it to you in public, do you understand?" Daoxian understands that Xinjue Jinren died 400 years ago, and this corpse tied in Zhangzhou has nothing to do with Xinjue Jinren. Seeing Qin Daoxian being so eloquent, Qin Zhan nodded. "Yes, in order to compensate you, you can make a not excessive request to me." Hear this. Qin Daoxian's heart was beating fast. He pursed his lips and said, "Daoxian does have a request." "Say." "I want to use the immortal corpse in your hand." "Oh." The palace master of Jinhai Palace raised his brows slightly and said with a smile, "Looks like I took a look at it last time, but I didn't expect you to actually gain something else in the immortal mansion." "I." The hall master of Jinhai Palace raised his hand. "No need to explain, I said that the gains of the three of you in the immortal mansion are all my rewards. Not to mention the inheritance of exercises, even if it is a pure Yang fairy weapon, I will not break my promise." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian quickly shut up. "The request you made is not excessive," the hall master of Jinhai Hall nodded, "but I have to remind you that the vastness of the sea of consciousness of immortals is far beyond your imagination. Even if he is dead, you still have a great chance of getting lost in the vast sea of consciousness of the other party. Are you sure you want to risk a broken legacy?" "I confirm." Qin Daoxian was decisive. "Okay." The words fall. The master of Jinhai Palace waved his sleeves, and a transparent bead was suspended in front of the two of them. Next moment, the transparent beads grew bigger and bigger, and finally, a corpse full of Dao Yun appeared in front of the two of them. The consciousness attached to the real person of the immortal corpse has long been erased by the master of Jinhai Temple. Now, this immortal corpse was the same as when it was sitting in the immortal mansion of Shinjue, and it did not change in the slightest. Looking at this immortal corpse from an unknown number of years ago, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but sighed, I become immortal, will I also die? Of course he will die. The hall master of Jinhai Palace said indifferently, becoming an immortal is just a stage on the road of seeking the Tao. You will understand in the future that the avenue is endless. The avenue is endless. Qin Daoxian carefully understood the 4 words spoken by the hall master of Jinhai Palace, and felt as if he had caught something, but he had not grasped anything. Seeing Qin Daoxian's frowning expression, the hall master of Jinhai Palace did not say anything to disturb him. Half an hour. Qin Daoxian raised his head, cupped his hands and said, thank you for your guidance. It's just a feeling, it's not a pointer. The master of Jinhai Palace waved his hand, okay, let's go and choose the inheritance. Yes. Looking at the floating corpse in front of him, Qin Daoxian took a deep breath, and his consciousness rushed out from the sea of consciousness, covering the immortal corpse in front of him. Immediately after, he felt a sudden blackness in front of him. When he regained consciousness again, he seemed to have come to a vast starry sky. This is the immortal sea of consciousness? Qin Daoxian was stunned. Chapter 216. If you talk about Qin Daoxian's sea of knowledge, it's just a light in the darkness, and the sea of knowledge in front of you is the boundless starry sky. Beneath the starry sky is an endless sea. This endless sea is so vast that it seems to stretch to the end of the starry sky. The sea of divine light. Qin Daoxian recognized it instantly. This is the sea of divine light cultivated by the divine power of Ding Soul Divine Light. However, what is different from the introduction in Ding Soul Divine Light is that this sea of divine light has lost a bit of vitality and has a dead silence, just like a dead sea. He knew that this was a phenomenon caused by the death of the immortal. In such a vast sea of divine light, the limitless sea of consciousness cannot be seen. Such a strong person will actually die. Qin Daoxian muttered. After all, using the sea of knowledge to calculate the strength of the opponent's consciousness and soul, Qin Daoxian couldn't describe how strong the opponent was. In other words, the strength of the other party has exceeded the limit of Qin Daoxian's imagination. But such a strong man actually died. Thinking of this, the complacency in Qin Daoxian's heart disappeared instantly. Compared with this immortal Taoist, he is not even an ant. Such an existence would still die, let alone him? No matter how good his chances are, once he steps on the wrong path, his life and death will be eliminated, just like the immortal in front of him. Do some introspection. Qin Daoxian's consciousness flew towards the center of the sea of light. He knew that there was the source of divine light. It was in this immortal corpse that the God Ju Taoist obtained the source of divine light, and only then did he cultivate the infinite power of divine light, which is the soul-fixing divine light. Now, it was his turn. Qin Daoxian. In flight, countless stars flickered in front of Qin Daoxian, and these stars carried nothing else. It is the inheritance of various exercises and spells that the immortal has learned in his life. But Qin Daoxian abandoned these temptations and flew only in the direction of the source of divine light. Because he knows. Although his divine sense is very powerful, if he wants to accept the inheritance of the other party in the sea of immortal corpse knowledge, he will inevitably exhaust his divine sense. Until then, once the consciousness is exhausted, he may completely sink into the other party's sea of consciousness and can no longer get out. And his physical body will also become a walking corpse. The dangers in this place, the hall master of Jinhai Palace has long reminded them. It's just that the owner of Jinhai Palace did not know that Qin Daoxian's trip was not to find inheritance, but to obtain a source of divine light and open up his own sea of divine light. In the sea of knowledge, both time and space have lost their meaning. I don't know how far I flew and I don't know how long it took. Qin Daoxian finally flew to the core of the sea of light. The source of divine light. Seeing the sea of light like a galaxy below, Qin Daoxian was very excited. He desperately fished out a little light from Guanghai and held it up. Good weight. Qin Daoxian's face sank. Unexpectedly, his divine sense is comparable to that of a cultivator of the Zifu, but he can't hold a little source of divine light. How powerful is the complete sea of divine light? Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but feel a shudder in his soul. It's so heavy, how can I take it out? Qin Daoxian was in a heavy heart. After trying to fly for a while, he felt that his consciousness was exhausted and stopped again. Flying from here to the edge of the sea of consciousness, with the strength of my divine consciousness, I can't hold on at all. Qin Daoxian quickly came to this conclusion. He glanced at the source of divine light that was wrapped in his divine consciousness and floated in front of him, but was reluctant to discard it. After all, without the source of divine light, it is almost impossible for him to open up the sea of divine light. With this time he might become a Mahayana true immortal and ascend to the immortal realm. That's right, Hongmeng Enlightened Tao Sutra. Qin Daoxuan's eyes lit up. But then he frowned and said, however, when you meditate on the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, your consciousness is in a state of chaos. Will it sink into this? Qin Daoxian drummed in his heart. But immediately he strengthened his will and chose to take a risk. This extremely powerful supernatural power is right in front of you. If you give up without trying, how can Qin Daoxian be reconciled? Thinking of this, he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, in the sea of consciousness of the immortal corpse. Outside world. The Hall Master of Jinhai Palace watched Qin Daoxian sitting cross-legged in front of him, the immortal corpse floating between the two of them, silent. The monk wanted to go further on the spiritual path. You must have a heart that overcomes thorns and thorns. In Qin Daoxian he saw this quality. Although Qin Daoxuan's cultivation base is still weak, Qin Zhan has only seen this Taoism in a few people. To explore the sea of knowledge of immortals with foundation-building cultivation. To a certain extent, it's a complete life and death situation. If this immortal had not been dead for countless years, the sea of consciousness would have been damaged, and Qin Daoxian would be 100% lost in the sea of consciousness of the other party. Immortal corpse knows the sea. Qin Daoxian regained his consciousness again. He grabbed the source of divine light and flew towards the edge of the sea of consciousness again. Along the way, Qin Daoxian stopped to restore his consciousness every time he consumed 60% of his consciousness. I don't know how many times this is repeated. Finally withdrew from the other party's sea of consciousness. Call. The consciousness withdrew from the sea of consciousness of the immortal corpse, and Qin Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged in the hall, suddenly opened his eyes. The hall master of Jinhai Hall only saw a little light following Qin Daoxuan's divine consciousness into the other party's sea of consciousness, but he didn't get into it. This is the reward he promised to Qin Daoxian, and naturally he will not break his promise. Thank you, hall master. Qin Daoxian stood up and bowed his hands gratefully. Don't thank me, you deserve it. After the hall master of Jinhai Palace finished speaking, his body gradually became blurred, and together with the immortal corpse, he finally disappeared in front of Qin Daoxian. Mana incarnate. Qin Daoxian looked at the scene in front of him in shock. Unexpectedly, the hall master of Jinhai Palace was actually participating in the hall meeting in the form of mana. Hiss. Qin Daoxian couldn't help taking a deep breath. He remembered just now that the hall master of Jinhai Palace just pointed at Yi Wudao, and the other party was suppressed outside Yunxiao Palace without any resistance. You must know that Yi Wudao is not a cultivator in the Qi refining or foundation establishment period. He is Jindan cultivator. A mere avatar, one finger suppressed a Jindan cultivator. How strong is this Jinhai Palace hall master? Exit the Cloud Palace. Glancing at Yi Wudao, who was kneeling outside the palace, unable to move, Qin Daoxian flew away. Back to the residence. The Zhangzhou cultivators who came together to participate in the award have long been waiting in the palace where Qin Daoxian temporarily lived. Brother Zhou, Brother Zhang, Brother Zhao. Qin Daoxian cupped his hands towards the crowd and said with a smile, Are you waiting for me? What do you mean, who are you waiting for? Haha, Brother Qin, today you gave me a bad breath for my Zhangzhou cultivator. Henry Zhang bowed his hands to him and said solemnly, Brother Qin, your business will be my Zhang's business in the future. When you come to Xuan Mansion in the future, just tell me if you have anything. Me too. Taoist Huoling was unwilling to be left behind. Fellow Taoists are too polite. I, the Zhangzhou cultivator, are all one, so why do I need to thank you? He paused. It's just that in the Yunxiao Palace today, we and Yi Wudao have completely turned against each other. I wonder what everyone's plans will be in the future? Hear this. Zhou Mubai pondered for a while and said, My Zhou family has just discussed with everyone. Compared with the previous decision to build a fairy city together, we can even go a step further and jointly establish a business alliance. Business alliance. Qin Daoxuan's eyes lit up. Brother Zhou, what do you mean? What I mean is to use the influence of the major immortal clans in this house to form a business alliance that unites all the provinces in Zhangzhou, and its role is to open up trade between all immortal cities in Zhangzhou. Let all the mansions in Zhangzhou realize free trade. Hearing these words, Qin Daoxian was very excited. Not to mention Zhangzhou, the interior of Guang'an Mansion is very closed. In the past, most of the transactions of monks were only carried out in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. Afterwards, after the Yang family created a Guang'an Prefecture Immortal Alliance and established the Lingde Immortal City, the two immortal cities almost never communicated with each other. At present there are 3 immortal cities in Guang'an Prefecture, namely Guanhai Immortal City of Chen family, Guang'an Immortal City of Zhou family, and Lingde Immortal City of Yang family. But there is very little trade between these 3 immortal cities. Most of them conduct business activities within their respective fairy cities. This undoubtedly greatly hindered the circulation of commodities and economic development. For example, the monks in Guanhai Xianqing lacked a kind of elixir, and this kind of elixir was only available in Lingri Xianqing. If the monks in Guanhai Xianqing want to get this elixir, they have to spend a lot of time and go to Lingtian Xianqing to buy it. This is the disadvantage of the impassable trade between the immortal cities. Just imagine. Once the business alliance as mentioned by Zhou Mubai is established, the spiritual jade that is rich in Jinan Mansion will appear in the major immortal cities in the future. The various spiritual minerals and elixir that are abundant in Guang'an Prefecture can also be circulated in various prefectures. The same is true for other provinces. As such, it's a win-win for all parties. And the most important thing is that the Zhangzhou prefectures can unite to exclude the Yi family's Zhangzhou Immortal City. Go on like this. In 10 years at most, Zhangzhou Xianqing will become a ghost town, and all loose cultivators will escape from this Xianqing. Because in this immortal city, the scattered cultivators could not buy any useful resources, and even if they could, the price would be extremely high. This is the economic blockade. After listening to Zhou Mubai's explanation, everyone became interested in this business alliance. If it was in the past, everyone did not have the strength to establish a business alliance. But now, with Qinyuan Jianzong's large transport ships to transport materials, they are fully capable of establishing a business alliance covering the entire Zhangzhou. Brother Zhou's proposal is very good, it's just who will lead the establishment of the Zhangzhou Business Alliance? Henry Zhang's words immediately calmed the excited crowd. I saw that everyone was silent. Zhou Mubai smiled and said, My opinion is that the business alliance temporarily adopts a voting system, and we use the amount of spirit stones invested by each family after joining the business alliance to calculate the right of each family to vote. In the future, the decision and benefits of the business alliance will also adopt the principle of the minority obeying the majority. What do you think? Hear this. Those families who are not poor in money nodded in succession. In terms of strength, they are not necessarily comparable to the Zhou family, but compared to Lingshi, it is difficult to say. For example, the Zhao family in Jinan Mansion was no match for the Zhou family in terms of hard power. However, since the Zhao family owns a medium-sized spirit stone mine and a large-scale spirit jade mine, the Yi family is not necessarily an opponent of the Zhao family in terms of wealth. Chapter 217. The people present were basically the largest family cultivators in the Zhangzhou prefectures. These monks were either the patriarchs or the heirs of the patriarchs like Zhou Mubai. In the family, the right to speak is extremely large, and the agreement reached temporarily by everyone can basically be regarded as the attitude of the major families. After listening to Zhou Mubai's proposal, everyone was very excited. As long as they were not fools, they would be able to see how much benefit the establishment of a business alliance that gathered all the big families in Zhangzhou would bring to the big families. What's more, the establishment of Zhangzhou Business Alliance can also attack Zhangzhou Xianqing. Although in the face of interests, everyone gritted their teeth and let go of the hatred with the Yi family, but this did not mean that the major families in Zhangzhou had forgotten. Especially this time Yi Wudao abandoned the city and fled, and questioned everyone's military exploits in Yunshao Palace, which made everyone hate it. Such a person, even Jindan Cultivator, is not worthy of being the commander-in-chief of Zhangzhou Cultivator. Think of this. After thinking for a while, everyone agreed with Zhou Mubai's suggestion to establish a Zhangzhou Business Alliance. Okay, since everyone agrees to establish the Zhangzhou Business Alliance, we can draw up a detailed alliance on this proposal after we go back. Okay. Can? Just do it. Everyone nodded. A month later, the major families in Zhangzhou signed a Zhangzhou Trade Agreement and signed a covenant in Xianqing, Guang'an Prefecture. The name of the covenant was the Zhangzhou Business Alliance. So far, Zhangzhou has entered the era of free trade. Southwest waters of Wuxia. A large transport ship pierced the sky. The transport ship is unique. There is actually a small cave inside which is loaded with tens of thousands of monks. There is also a small square market built in it. The small town is very lively with people coming and going. If you look closely, you will find that most of these monks are scattered cultivators in Guanhai Xianqing and Guang'an Palace Xianqing. But now they actually took a large transport ship to travel between Guanhai Xianqing and Guang'an Palace Xianqing. Looking at the scene in front of him, Zhou Mubai sighed and said, I can't believe that my Cangzhou cultivator could have such a day of unity. I thought that after the fall of Zhenangwen, Cangzhou cultivator's spine was broken, but now it seems that Cangzhou the monk's spirit is still there. The Cangzhou cultivator's spirit has always been there, but in the battle of Zhenangwen, the Cangzhou cultivator died too aggrieved, and everyone has resentment in their hearts. Looking at the scene in Fang City, Chen Daoxian thought of the 12 monks who died in battle and said, in Cangzhou except for the Yi family cultivators, almost all the cultivators don't want to be commanded by the Yi family anymore. In fact, they are not afraid of death, but they are afraid of death, and they are even more afraid of infamy after death. Hear this. Zhou Mubai was silent for a long time, then he nodded, you are right. Recover Zhenangwen. Chen Daoxian stretched out his fist. Recover Zhenangwen. Zhou Mubai hammered the fist face and said solemnly. After speaking, the two smiled at each other. Brother Zhou, I have one more thing to ask for. Zhou Mubai turned his head to the side, pursed his lips and said with a smile, I guess it's because of your Qin family's affiliated race, the mermen? That's exactly what it is. Chen Daoxian nodded. This time that Cangzhou corpse tied in order to protect my Qin family, the mermaid clan guarded Shuanghu Island, and my Qin family should respond to this loyalty. I really didn't expect that the Mer people finally chose your Qin family. Zhou Mubai sighed. Actually, I always wanted to subdue the mermen, but unfortunately the other party was unwilling to meet them several times. In addition, the people in the clan didn't think much of the mermen, so I let it go. After sighing with emotion, Zhou Mubai continued, although the Mer people of Lingbei Island are of little value, they have also cultivated water spirit beads for my Zhou family to practice with my Zhou family in the qi refining period. It's not difficult to put them back, but you have to give my Zhou family a guarantee. Hearing this, Chen Daoxian smiled and said, my Qin family will give priority to supplying the water spirit beads that the Zhou family needs for cultivation in the future. Okay. After receiving this promise, Zhou Mubai nodded and agreed. Although the Mer people of Lingbei Island are a major specialty of the Zhou family, it is completely nonsense to say how much benefit they have. In total, the Zhou family captured less than 1,000 people of the Merman clan. These female sharks, even if they keep cultivating spirit beads day and night, how many can they breed in a year? After careful calculation, if there are tens of thousands of spirit beads, it is a good incense. At the price of the Zhou family's 50 spirit stones and a water spirit bead, it is only 1,000,000 spirit stone level profit. For the Zhou family, this amount of money is a complete drizzle. The water spirit beads have very limited effects on high-level cultivators, and they have a great effect on cultivators in the qi refining stage. Since Chen Daoxian proposed to give priority to the supply of water spirit beads in the Zhou family, why didn't the Zhou family be a favored person? Then this benefit. The Zhou family hopes to win over the Qin family in the Cangzhou Business Alliance. You know, Cangzhou Business Alliance is a business alliance in Cangzhou. However, with the continuous expansion of the business scale of the various governments, sooner or later, it will become an alliance organization that truly controls the entire Cangzhou cultivator. It can be said that in the future, whoever controls the Cangzhou Business Alliance will control the lifeline of Cangzhou's resources. From another point of view, the family that has mastered the Cangzhou Business Alliance has the right to speak in the entire Cangzhou, second only to Qianyuan Jianzong. After all, if you offend Qianyuan Jianzong, as long as you don't violate the ban, you will only be punished at most. And offend the leader of the Cangzhou Business Alliance, the other party can completely block the immortal city of your family like the immortal city of Cangzhou. This can be seen by the big families in the Cangzhou prefectures. This was also the reason why people were so apprehensive at the time. Everyone wants to dominate the business alliance by themselves, and they are afraid that after other families dominate the business alliance, they will suppress their own family. Chen Daoxian naturally knew what the Zhou family meant. The Qin family has 10 votes in the Cangzhou Business Alliance, and it is the family with the highest voting power in the entire Cangzhou Business Alliance. The reason is that when the covenant was signed, the major families were all vying to use their money-making abilities, making it difficult to sign the covenant. In the end, in desperation, the major families stepped back and adopted the form of taking shares in transport ships. This time, the pressure of everyone's fight for wealth has finally subsided. Although there are transport ships in all major families, the number is limited. Moreover, the number of transport ships obtained by each family is all in exchange for military exploits, and there is no reason for everyone to object. In this way, the Qin family has suddenly become the family with the largest voting rights in the business alliance. The initial capital of the entire business alliance consists of 96 transport ships and 100 million spirit stones. If the funds need to be increased in the later stage, the members of the business alliance need to vote together. To some extent, the Zhangzhou Business Alliance is very similar to the consortium of Qin Daoxuan's previous life. But there are some differences. In Qin Daoxuan's view, the greatest value of this business alliance is to open up free trade in Zhangzhou. As for the value of the business alliance itself, except for the large transport ships inside, that's it. Moreover, the right to use these large transport ships is in the hands of the major families, not the business alliances. Therefore, this Zhangzhou Business Alliance is a looser business organization than the Guang'an Prefecture Xianming. At least that is the case for now, and no one knows how far it can develop in the future. After casually chatting about the trivial matter of the Mare people, Zhou Mubai said sternly, "Brother Qin, I heard that you Guanhai Xianqing made a kind of talisman currency called Lingshi coin. Is there such a thing?" Hearing this, Qin Daoxuan's heart skipped a beat and he said calmly, "This is indeed the case. Are you planning to implement the Qin family's contribution system to the scattered cultivators in the entire Immortal City? Lingshi coins are different from family contribution points." "What is the difference?" Zhou Mubai frowned. "Brother Zhou, dare to ask your Zhou family's family contribution points, can they be guaranteed?" Hearing this, Zhou Mubai asked in confusion, "What do you mean by guarantee?" "What I mean is, if the Zhou family cultivator takes the contribution points to exchange the spirit stone at the same time, will your Zhou family be able to get this spirit stone?" Hearing this, Zhou Mubai's expression changed. "How is this possible? There are hundreds of thousands of cultivators in the Zhou family. Even if each cultivator in the Zhou family has only 1,000 contribution points on average, that would be hundreds of millions of spiritual stones. For such a huge sum of spirit stones, even if the Zhou family could take it out, they had to piece it together. And after taking out this spiritual stone, the Zhou family's liquidity was exhausted in an instant, causing the operation of the family's various industries to stagnate. The last time the Zhou family spent hundreds of millions of spirit stones for the army to deal with the corpse tide, it was completely helpless. Under normal circumstances, how could the Zhou family spend such a large sum of spirit stones? Of course Zhou Mubai understood this simple truth. "What do you mean your Qin family can take out so many spirit stones at once to exchange spirit stone coins?" "Can?" Qin Daoxian was decisive. "But what's the point of you doing this? I want the monks in Guanhai Xianqing to get used to using spirit stone coins, and eventually slowly use spirit stone coins to replace the circulation of spirit stones and become a new currency." After hearing these words, Zhou Mubai looked at Qin Daoxian with a shocked expression and murmured, "This difficulty is too great." "Yes, it is indeed difficult, but no matter how difficult it is, as long as you keep doing it, you will always see hope. If you don't do it, then there will be no hope at all." Qin Daoxian said and laughed. "Looking at it now, the effect is not bad. The monks in Guanghai Xianqing basically accepted this currency. Anyway, this currency can be freely exchanged for spirit stones, and there is no loss for the monks." "But what is the benefit of your Qin family doing this?" Zhou Mubai frowned. "Brother Zhou, don't you think it's a huge waste to use spirit stones as currency?" Hearing this, Zhou Mubai nodded in approval. "It is indeed a huge waste. If the Zhangzhou cultivators gathered all the spiritual stones to build the spiritual veins, it would be enough for all the loose cultivators to have the spiritual veins to practice, but it's a pity." Zhou Mubai said and shook his head. "This is destined to be impossible." "Yeah, so I want to try it." Hear this. In Zhou Mubai's heart, he couldn't help but raise an unspeakable respect for the young cultivator in front of him. The difficulty and resistance of this matter, Zhou Mubai thought about it for a while and felt panic in his heart. But Qin Daoxian did it without hesitation. Whether he succeeds or not, his courage are incomparable to all the cultivators in Zhangzhou. Immediately he thought that Qin Daoxian knew that in the qi refining period, he had understood the sword intent and built the foundation, and he had done it without hesitation. This man's stubbornness is unparalleled. For some reason, Zhou Mubai had such a sentence in his heart. Seeing that Zhou Mubai didn't speak, Qin Daoxian was also silent. In fact, he had another reason not to say it. That is, with the advancement of the industrialization process of the Qin family in the future, the productivity will increase, and the use of spirit stones as currency will greatly hinder commodity trade. The obstruction of commerce and trade will hinder the process of industrialization. Qin Daoxian must plan ahead. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian joked intentionally or unintentionally, "Brother Zhou, I will push this currency to the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture in the future. You can help me." Hearing this, Zhou Mubai didn't care too much and said with a smile, "Only you can make the monks in the immortal city of Guang'an House accept it. I have no objection." "Okay, it's a deal." Zhou Mubai never thought that his unintentional words would come true one day in the future. Boom. The huge transport ship slowly landed in the harbor of Guanhai Xianqing. The top. Countless goods and monks from Guang'an Mansion Xianqing poured into Guanhai Xianqing, making the whole Guanhai Xianqing even more lively. Step into Guanhai Xianqing, and after some wandering, Zhou Mubai saw that Qin Daoxian was a little absent-minded, and he immediately thought that Qin Daoxian must have returned to his heart after being busy outside for so long. So he smiled and said, "Brother Qin, don't worry about me, just please." "Okay." Qin Daoxian nodded. "Brother Zhou, he'll go back first even if I have something to do, he'll tell the sergeants in the city." "Go." Zhou Mubai nodded. Qin Daoxian no longer greeted each other, and disappeared in front of Zhou Mubai in a flash. After hundreds of interest, Qin Daoxian skillfully released the defensive formation and flew into Jianghu Island. Although this trip is only a few short months, but Qin Daoxian felt that the time was extraordinarily long. This time, Qinyuan Jianzong and his party had seen a wider world. Knowing that Guang'an Prefecture and even the entire Zhangzhou are just a depression, the smugness in the past could not help but disappear. He always thought that his strength was absolutely invincible among monks of the same rank, but after a trip to Qinyuan Sword Sect, Qin Daoxian was no longer so confident. In the foundation building period, the threshold of the three-layered sword intent was touched, and there is not necessarily such an existence in Qinyuan Jianzong. But the sword intent understood by the disciples of Qinyuan Sword Sect was not comparable to Qin Daoxian. When he first comprehended sword intent, Qin Daoxian didn't understand that sword intent had potential. But after getting the Qinyuan Sword Classic, he knew it. So far, the realm of Kendo that he has always been proud of seems to have nothing to be proud of. After all, the sword intent he comprehended was only a branch of the sword intent of the water movement, with limited potential. Unless he comprehends the five-element sword intent, otherwise. Take your time with the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. I can finally comprehend the sword meaning of water. Qin Daoxian believed in himself. And he looked at the source of divine light in his mind, and a sense of pride filled his heart again. Consciousness swept away. Seeing that the cultivators of the Qin family were all busy performing their duties, Qin Daoxian did not disturb anyone and returned to his spiritual residence. Next, let's take stock of the gains from this trip. In the courtyard, Qin Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged, said excitedly. Chapter 218. Qin Daoxian took out a blue spiritual flag from the storage bag. Michen banner. Qin Daoxian looked at the blue spirit flag in front of him and took a deep breath. He has had this treasure for several months, but there has been no energy to study it in detail, or, in other words, no energy to set its transmission coordinates. The function of the Michen banner is very simple. That is, at a critical moment, using the means of almost teleportation, he took the monk to escape. However, this kind of space transmission is also divided into random and non-random. The so-called randomness means that the monks are resigned to the fate and allow Mi Qin Fan to teleport you to a certain place within 100,000 miles. Another space teleportation requires the cultivator to set the space coordinates in advance. Back then, it was so difficult to grasp the real person of Xinjue, because he set the spatial coordinates in Xinjue Immortal Mansion. The Xinjue Immortal Mansion was created by the immortals before they sat down, and no one knew its exact location. Therefore, Qinyuan Jianzong failed to completely eliminate Xinjue Jinren. So that 400 years later he ran out again to stir up the situation. Immerse the consciousness into the interior of Mi Qin Fan. Qin Daoxian found that Mi Qin Fan can only set up to 3 spatial coordinates. Qin Daoxian immediately set the first spatial coordinate on Jianghu Island. Thus, no matter what danger the family encounters in the future, as long as it is within a range of 100,000 miles, Qin Daoxian can instantly teleport back in space. After studying for a long time, I finally set the spatial coordinates successfully. Qin Daoxian looked happy, played with the blue spirit flag and put it in the storage bag. Next, the most important thing is to open up the sea of divine light. Qin Daoxian looked at the source of divine light shining brightly in the sea of consciousness, and said excitedly. Looking at the 30 stardust spinning around the golden scriptures in the center of the sea of consciousness, Qin Daoxian let them collide with each other. Next second, Countless insights about Ding Soul Divine Light flooded into my mind. Qin Daoxian also understood the process of opening up the Sea of Light. Take an inappropriate example. If one compares divine consciousness to a pile of firewood, then the Sea of Divine Light is a sea of fire. And the source of divine light is the kind of fire that transforms the firewood of divine consciousness into a sea of fire. Figure out this relationship. Qin Daoxian suddenly became confident in opening up the Sea of Divine Light. After a stick of incense, Qin Daoxian, who had thoroughly comprehended Dying Soul Divine Light, used the fire seed left by the immortal in the center of the Sea of Knowledge to ignite the sea of fire that belonged to him. The source of divine light was shining brighter and brighter in the depths of his sea of consciousness. But because it is a rootless source, Qin Daoxian can also feel that it is becoming illusory every moment. See this scene. Qin Daoxian's heart tightened. He knew that if the source of divine light was completely exhausted, he would not be able to open up his own sea of divine light. The cultivation of soul divine light was a complete failure. Unless he can get a second source of divine light, it will be difficult to open up the Sea of Divine Light. Think of this. Qin Daoxian did not dare to neglect. He hurriedly manipulated his divine sense, and like a moth to the fire, he rushed towards the source of divine light. Hiss! In an instant, Qin Daoxian only felt a pain that touched his soul and drowned him. It hurts. The sudden pain almost tore his soul to pieces. Qin Daoxian's whole body swayed wildly, his muscles were tense, blood rushed down, and his body bowed like a boiled prawn. What? Qin Daoxian couldn't help falling down from the warm jade futon he was sitting on, and curled up in pain. Bang! It was so painful. Damn it. What he knew about the soul-defining light did not say that the process of cultivation would be so painful. Qin Daoxian clenched his gums, his face grim. He didn't know whether this kind of pain was caused by the opening of the Sea of Divine Light, or whether it was always there in the future cultivation process. But now, riding a tiger, he can't manage so much anymore. He paid such a huge price to get this source of divine light, and he didn't want to waste it. Silently recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. Consciousness that was consumed frantically in the Sea of Consciousness was also quickly replenished. The consciousness in the Sea of Knowledge has reached a strange state. While frantically depleting it, it recovers quickly. Until the source of divine light left by the immortals was completely exhausted, Qin Daoxian finally opened up his own Sea of Divine Light. It seems that the Sea of Divine Light that has just been opened should not be called the sea. Its diameter is only about 100 feet in diameter, and at most it can be regarded as a larger pond. But Qin Daoxian knew that this pond could help him grow the Sea of Knowledge in the future. Is happy. The next second, a sudden memory fragment poured into Qin Daoxian's Sea of Consciousness. This? Qin Daoxian frowned. Is it the memory fragment left in the Sea of Knowledge by the immortals of the upper realm, which happened to be left in the source of divine light? In an instant, Qin Daoxian guessed the ins and outs of the matter. To be honest, Qin Daoxian is still very interested in the memory fragment of the immortal. With excitement, Qin Daoxian opened the fragmented memory fragment. As a result, Qin Daoxian was very disappointed. Only 2 images flashed through the memory fragment. The first picture is of a Taoist dressed in white, clutching his chest and walking out of a space crack. In the second picture, the Taoist waved his hand before dying, and then the entire underwater world became brighter. This is the source of Wan Xinghai? Qin Daoxian looked at this scene in shock and muttered. The first time he entered the Wangxinghai underwater world, he was shocked by the countless stars in the Xinghai layer. Unexpectedly, this Xinghai layer was actually left by this immortal. However, why did he leave this star sea layer? Could it be, what is he hiding in this star sea layer? Qin Daoxian secretly said. After thinking for a long time, Qin Daoxian, who found nothing, shook his head. Forget it, it's useless to think too much even if this immortal left something in the Xinghai layer. For countless years, I don't know how many high-level monks have traveled to and from the Wangxinghai underwater world and the land, but no one has found it, and naturally it is impossible for me to find it easily. However, a seed of doubt was buried in Qin Daoxian's heart. The center of the Sea of Knowledge. A scroll of golden scriptures floated in the air. Below the scriptures is the Sea of Divine Light that is more than 100 feet tall, and beyond that is the vast Sea of Consciousness. With Qin Daoxian's cultivation base on the 3rd floor, his Sea of Consciousness is about 100 miles in diameter, and outwards, it is a darkness of nothingness. In theory, the space within the Sea of Consciousness is not the same as the space in the material world. All that can exist in the Sea of Consciousness are intangible and intangible. such as consciousness. It is relatively rare for tangible and qualitative things to exist in the sea of consciousness, such as Qin Daoxuan's golden scriptures, including the comprehension stardust stored by him, and the current sea of light. All belong to the tangible category. As for shape and quality, Qin Daoxian felt that there was only one kind of golden scriptures. Only. This golden scripture of his seems to have taken root in his sea of consciousness, and he is not willing to move at all. Even if Qin Daoxian wanted to take it out, he couldn't take it out at all. About this question. While Qin Daoxian was helpless, he could only command this uncle, if he hoped that his cultivation would be high. Looking at the sea of divine light more than 100 meters below the golden scriptures in the center of the sea of knowledge, Qin Daoxuan's face finally overflowed with joy. After taking so many risks and wasting so much energy, the sea of divine light was finally opened up. With the opening of the sea of light, Qin Daoxian instantly understood what the so-called soul-defying light was. The so-called soul-defining divine light is just a beam of light that is shot from the sea of divine light towards the sea of consciousness of the enemy. Well known. Since divine consciousness is invisible and intangible, it cannot directly hurt the enemy, unless you practice special consciousness attack spells. From another point of view, it belongs to this kind of divine consciousness attack spell. In fact, the soul-ding divine light can not only attack the divine consciousness, but also defend the divine consciousness. Only. Qin Daoxuan's sea of consciousness is dominated by golden scriptures, and there is no shortage of defense methods for spiritual consciousness. If he wants to hurt Qin Daoxuan's soul in his sea of consciousness, he must pass the golden scriptures. Qin Daoxian estimated. The entire world of immortality cannot find this character. Therefore, for him, the more meaningful part of the soul-fixing divine light lies in expanding the sea of consciousness, strengthening the consciousness, and adding a means of attacking the consciousness. Actually, consciousness attack spell is a very powerful means. The reason why Shinjue Jinren can fight beyond the ranks is because of the magical power of Dingxin and Xinguang. Moreover, the power of soul-setting divine light will continue to increase with the growth of the sea of divine light, and there is no limit at all. Because the sea of divine light will expand with the expansion of the sea of consciousness, and the sea of consciousness has no limit. There is no limit to the power of the soul conditioning light. Unfortunately, my sea of divine light is only a few 100 feet tall. If you want to expand the sea of consciousness, you must expand it to the same size as the sea of consciousness. 100 feet in diameter to 100 miles in diameter. This is no small project. No way who told him that his sea of consciousness was different from that of ordinary people. If it is replaced by the sea of consciousness of the cultivator in the Qi refining period, it is estimated that the sea of consciousness and the consciousness of the other party will skyrocket several times as soon as the sea of divine light is opened. The next day, only the Qin family knew the news of the patriarch's return. For a time, the cultivators of the Qin family on Jianghu Island were all immersed in a festive carnival. Because in addition to the return of Qin Daoxian himself, he also brought back 10 large transport ships for the family. These 10 large transport ships. There is one parked in the harbor of Jianghu Island. After the Qin family cultivators heard the news, they rushed to the harbor and visited the family's transport ship. Uncle Daochu, this transport ship doesn't look much bigger than my Qin family's cargo ship? It's only less than 500 feet. After seeing the transport ship, a monk of the blessing generation pouted in disappointment. Stinky boy, you know shit. Qin Daochu reprimanded. I usually tell you to learn the artifact refining, each of them is inexperienced and incompetent, and you can't even tell whether the artifact is good or bad. The crowd heard this. Only then did they notice the compelling aura emanating from this transport ship, and they dared not underestimate it. Twin Lakes Island Harbor. Qin Daoxian stood on the dock and looked at the excited clansmen. He waved at the crowd and said, "Come on, let's go in and visit." Oh. Everyone was thrilled to hear about the opportunity to visit the rumored large transport ship. Young Patriarch, I heard that when recruiting troops on the front line of Izumo, this kind of transport ship was used to transport sergeants, isn't it? Beside him, Qin Fuxing looked at the behemoth in front of him in surprise and asked, "Right?" Qin Daoxian nodded, then looked at Qin Xinhe on his right. "Uncle 13, let's go." "Okay." Qin Xinhe looked at the huge transport ship in front of him and was filled with emotion. He never dared to imagine that the Qin family would one day be able to master this strategic tool. This large transport ship is the same as a large weapon of war. Qinyuan Jianzong rarely sells to Wan Xinghai's big family. If it weren't for this coincidence, the big families in Sangzhou's prefectures would not have thought of exchanging so many transport ships. Along the way, Qin Daoxian told Uncle 13 about the Sangzhou business alliance in detail. After listening to Qin Xianhe, he frowned and said, "Do you want Daolin to represent the Qin family and deal with the Sangzhou business alliance?" "Right." Qin Daoxian nodded. "However, will Daolin's cultivation level be too low?" Qin Xianhe hesitated. Although Daolin's cultivation base is low, after all, the foundation has been successfully established, and it is no problem to be on his own. Qin Daoxian paused. The big clans in the various houses and the children who are responsible for dealing with things outside are all just building foundations. Hear this. Qin Xianhe stopped talking. In fact, he knew that Qin Daoxian was inaccurate. Although the monks who deal with foreign affairs of the big clans in the prefectures are foundation-building cultivation bases, they are basically monks in the late foundation-building stage, and it is rare for a family to send a foundation-building early monk to sit on one side. Because of this cultivation, once there is a conflict, it will only be eaten. Of course, Qin Daoxian knew what Qin Xianhe was worried about. It's just that at this stage there is no suitable monk available in his hands. Qin Daochu is in charge of the Magical Instrument Research Institute, Qin Daolian is in charge of the Medicinal Herb Factory, and Qin Daochuan is in charge of the bank, which is a top priority. The remaining Taoist monks also have their own priorities. In addition, there are 4 Taoist monks who are only 17 or 18 years old, and they are sent out to sit on one side. No matter their cultivation or age, they all fail to meet the standard. Only Qin Daolin age, cultivation base, experience all roughly match. As for the monks of the Fu character generation, let alone the cultivators of the Qin family's blessing generation, although their cultivation progressed faster than the Taoist cultivators, they were all too young and embarrassed for their duties. The Taoist monk of the Qin family. Except for the youngest group, basically all of them succeeded in foundation building. Today, together with Qin Daoxian, the Qin family has a total of 10 monks of the Taoist generation, including 6 monks in the foundation building period. They are Qin Daoxian, Qin Daochu, Qin Daochuan, Qin Daolian, Qin Daolin, and Qin Daozi. Among them, Qin Daolin and Qin Daozi had the worst talents, they only had spiritual roots, but under the training of the Qin family regardless of the cost, they also succeeded in building a foundation at the age of just over 20 years old. Therefore, the level of foundation building is not a difficult task for monks with sufficient resources. The biggest reason for those monks who cannot build foundations is not spiritual roots but resources. In fact, it is normal to think about it. If the first stage of the cultivation path is so difficult to build a foundation, how can we go on the later path of cultivation? Chat room. Everyone walked towards the transport ship together. Qin Daoxian looked at Qin Daochu, who was not far away, and waved at him. Seeing Qin Daoxian beckoning to him, Qin Daochu ran over and said with a smile, "Young patriarch, are you looking for me? I'm not at home during this time. You and the students under your command are not lazy, right?" When Qin Daochu, who was originally elated, heard this, his face suddenly collapsed. I saw that he faced Qin Daoxian with a bitter face. "Young patriarch, you are not teaching us in your family. The progress of our Institute of Magical Instruments in researching new instruments has dropped too much." Hearing these words, Qin Daoxian was not surprised. Without the function of preaching, with the talents of the Qin family cultivators, it is indeed difficult to be competent for the important task of creating new types of instruments. Does the thing I asked you to study have any eyes? Hearing this, Qin Daochu looked happy, nodded and said, "I have it." Chapter 219. The next day. Chongping Institute of Magical Instruments. Under the guidance of Qin Daochu, Qin Daoxian visited the Institute of Magical Instruments, which had changed drastically. Compared to a few months ago, the Qin family's Magical Instrument Research Institute has added a lot of new staff. Entering the Institute of Magical Instruments, Qin Daoxian saw many new faces. He knew that these were the seedlings of the artifact refiners selected from Chongping Xiuxian Primary School. Looking at the buildings, the crowd kept moving. Qin Daoxian nodded, turned to Qin Daochu beside him and said, "It's finally a bit of a look." Hey, Qin Daochu said with a naive smile, "After struggling for so long, if it doesn't work at all, wouldn't it disappoint you, young patriarch?" "Okay." Qin Daoxian pointed at the cultivators of the blessing generation who came and went and said with a smile, "Whether it is effective or not, it is not based on these superficial skills." "I know," Qin Daochu nodded. "Young patriarch, please come here." Saying that, he made a pleased gesture. Qin Daoxian nodded, and together with Qin Daochu, walked towards the largest instrument laboratory in the research institute. As the two entered the spacious laboratory, Qin Daoxian found that puppet beasts of various ranks were placed everywhere in this laboratory. From the lowest first-order low-end to the highest third-order low-end, everything. Good guy. Qin Daoxian stared blankly at the third-order low-grade puppet beast that had been dismantled from the laboratory in front of him and murmured, "The third-order low-grade puppet, how did your Magical Instrument Research Institute get it?" "Of course I bought it." Qin Daochu said as a matter of course. "How can you do research without spending money? If you want to thoroughly understand the working principle of the spirit control array, dismantling the puppet is a must." "Hear this?" Qin Daoxuan's mouth twitched and nodded. "You are right. I hope your research results are worthy of the family's investment." "Who knows?" Qin Daochu said with confidence. "Young patriarch, if you have provided the inheritance of the puppet technique and dismantled so many puppets, we still can't figure out the working principle of the spirit control array, then our Magic Weapon Research Institute is too incompetent." "Okay, don't blow it, let me see your research results." "Okay." Qin Daochu nodded, and then waved to a monk of the blessing generation beside him. Immediately after, a strange-looking instrument was brought over. Qin Daochu pointed to the magic weapon in front of him and said, "Young patriarch, please take a look." Heard. Qin Daoxian looked at the strange magic weapon in front of him and asked, "Is this the result of your research during this period?" "Exactly." Qin Daochu said excitedly, "Don't underestimate this thing. Do you know that puppet beasts can release spells?" Qin Daoxian nodded. "Then do you know why puppet beasts can release spells?" Hearing this, Qin Daoxian frowned. Although he exchanged his military exploits from Qinyuan Jianzong to the inheritance of first and second order puppet arts, he has not studied puppet arts. Therefore, I don't know why the puppet beast can release spells at will. Normally, only monks have this ability and can cast spells at will. Although the spells released by the puppet beasts are flawed, they can only be predicted in advance, and they cannot be controlled by the consciousness after they are released like the spells released by the monks. But on a massive battlefield, cannon fodder like puppet beasts is still very useful. In addition to being cannon fodder, it can also suppress the enemy's firepower. On the battlefield of Izumo, the puppet beasts purchased by the Shenqing Dao League from the Chenji Temple caused many hardships to the Wanxinghai monk. Although one-on-one, the cultivator is not afraid of the puppet beast, but once this thing scales and forms a firepower coverage, no matter how flexible the cultivator is, there is no other way but to resist the damage. Can't everyone be able to teleport on the battlefield at will like the master of Jinhai Palace? If the Wanxinghai cultivator had this ability, he would have ruled the human race long ago. Finally, seeing the puzzlement on Qin Daoxuan's face, Qin Daochu seemed to be greatly encouraged, and he said excitedly, "It's because of the spirit control formation." He paused. Although the spirit control formation is called a formation, it is actually a special container for storing spell patterns. Young patriarch, please take a look. I saw Qin Daochu brought the head of a leopard-shaped puppet beast. Thousand Machines Hall is inscribed with the first-order spell Wind Blade technique, and it is sealed in the spirit control formation. When the puppet beast gets the master's order or the attack order is preset in advance, it will attack automatically. Attack the enemy. Qin Daochu opened the mouth of the leopard-shaped puppet beast. Young patriarch, look after the spirit control array method re-engraves the sealed spell pattern, then spit it out through the leopard's mouth. With Qin Daochu injecting real energy into the mouth of the leopard-shaped puppet beast. In its open mouth, a mass of wind blades is slowly taking shape. Qin Daoxian saw it more clearly. He found that when Qin Daochu injected the real essence, there was a magic Dao pattern in the mouth of the puppet beast. This is what you call a replica, right? Qin Daochu, who had thoroughly researched it, nodded in admiration. I have to say, this Thousand Machines Palace is really too thoughtful. Spirit control array. Magic Dao pattern re-engraving. These things that I have never heard of in Wanxinghai, they can actually do it. It's very imaginative. Qin Daoxian sincerely praised. This world is never short of geniuses, and he will not think that relying on the ability of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic to store his understanding, he has created several new types of instruments, and he will underestimate the world. You must know that the magic tools in the world of immortality today are constantly created by generations of geniuses. If Qin Daoxian can create his own magic weapon, other people can also do it. But, what does this have to do with your magic weapon? It's relevant, it's very relevant. Qin Daochu said excitedly, Young patriarch, do you know how to make magic talismans? Of course I know, don't forget, I'm a first-order talisman. Qin Daoxian smiled and said. But then, his face suddenly became serious. Spiritual control formation re-engraving the spell Dao pattern, you mean? Right? Qin Daochu nodded. Amulet-making machine. Hear this. Qin Daochuan's complexion kept changing. He murmured, the making of a talisman is simpler than refining a tool or alchemy, the most difficult of which is to engrave the spell pattern on the talisman paper or spirit jade. This point, the cultivator can still make mistakes. Can you do it with this magic weapon? Hey, of course it can't be done. Qin Daochu scratched his head, but this is one direction, do you understand? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian was almost laughed at by Qin Daochu. After a long time, you told me that you have a direction, right? Yes. Qin Daochu nodded as a matter of course. Young patriarch, you have also created a new type of magic weapon. You should know that sometimes the research direction is the most important thing. In fact, we have already solved a lot of problems for this magic symbol making machine, and now there are only 2 or 3 problems that have not been solved. Once solved, I guarantee that ordinary mortals can use this machine to make magic symbols. Hearing that ordinary mortals can use it to create magic talismans, Qin Daoxian was instantly moved. Compared with monks, the most numerous people in this world are mortals. But in the eyes of monks, the role of mortals is dispensable. For monks, whether it is to produce resources or force, mortals are almost useless. Because of this, the status of mortals in this world is very low. Even under the protection of Qinyuan Jianzong's decree, one Xinghai cultivator treated mortals wantonly and killed them without caring. Even the natives are terrified of their own monks. This is also the reason why the immortal cities built by the major families are divided between mortals and monks. It was because he was afraid that mortals would collide with the monks and provoke the monks with bad temperament to kill them. Now Qin Daochu said that ordinary mortals can use this magic tool to make magic talismans, which means that mortals can also independently produce the resources used by monks, which is the first time in the world. Actually, Qin Daochuan's vision of industrialized alchemy and alchemy is to allow mortals to replace monks and participate in the production process. But he worked hard for a long time. It was found that the role of monks in the process of alchemy and tool refining could not be replaced. For example, the melting furnace he invented. It only solves the problem of handling materials in the process of refining low-level magic tools. It can be regarded as the use of mortals and melting furnaces, liberating part of the energy of the monks. And the follow-up shaping and the most crucial fusion formation, there is no shortage of cultivators at all. Not to mention that in the refining process of high-level magic tools, the current Rongling furnace cannot process materials at all. Now, Qin Daochu actually said that their Magic Weapon Research Institute can come up with a machine that completely allows mortals to produce magic symbols, which naturally makes Qin Daoxian excited. Okay. He patted Qin Daochu on the shoulder hard. Since there is a direction, let's go and do it. If you have any difficulties, just say it, I will support you unconditionally. What you want is your words, young patriarch. Qin Daochu was very excited when he heard Qin Daochuan's assurance. Immediately, he complained in front of Qin Daoxian, you don't know how much our Magical Instrument Research Institute has spent so much time studying this magic talisman making machine. Talking about? Qin Daoxian was quite puzzled. Yes, he pointed to all kinds of materials in the laboratory, incomplete puppets, strange instruments. These must be bought with spirit stones. But I went to the old patriarch. He said that now he only cares about the monks of the Fuzi generation, and he doesn't ask about family affairs. I went to Daochuan again and he said that the spirit stones in the bank could not be used. Young patriarch, you have to help me, our Magic Weapon Research Institute has no spiritual stones at all now. No money at all? Qin Daoxian said in shock. I remember a few months ago, you still have 10 million spirit stones in the account of the Institute of Magical Instruments? Yes, but the flowers are all gone. Qin Daochu, how did you spend it? Qin Daoxian was stunned. It took more than 2 months to burn 10 million spiritual stones and cultivate spiritual veins, right? Young patriarch, look. Qin Daochu pointed to a third-order puppet beast not far away. The puppet beast captured from the battlefield mountain of Izumo country alone has more than 1 million spirit stones, which I bought from another government. And this, the third-order phantom meteor gold, 30,000 spirit stones per pound. And this? All right. Listening to his complaints, Qin Daoxian waved his hand quickly. I will solve the problem of research funding. You can't solve it yet. It's not enough for me to solve it for you, right? No, how dare I? Qin Daochu made a bow and smiled. Young patriarch, now that the family is big, there are many stalls and you are often busy, sometimes not returning for a few months or maybe not returning for a few years in the future. But we can't stop the project of the Institute of Magical Instruments. We can't wait for you to come back here dryly every time we are short of money, do you think? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian frowned. He knew that Qin Daochu was right. There are more and more things in the family now, and there are more and more places where various departments need to use funds. In the past, the family financial power has always been held by him personally. And now, since Qin Daoxian often goes out, it is a little inappropriate to do so. He must find a suitable person to take over the financial power of the family, so that when he is not in the family, the lack of funds will not affect the development of the family. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian nodded and said, I will discuss your question at the family meeting. Hear this. Qin Daochu stopped talking. But soon he added, I still have a question. Qin Daoxian glared, Is there a problem, don't you know to clarify it at one time? Yes, Qin Daochu chuckled. Young Patriarch, when you come back this time, can you give us more makeup lessons for the Institute of Magical Instruments? He deliberately aggravated his tone on the makeup class. There is no problem with making up the class, has the confidentiality work been done? Qin Daoxian said seriously. Hearing this, Qin Daochu also became serious, he nodded and said, Don't worry, the confidentiality work in this area can be said to be the strictest in the family. The cultivators of the blessed generation we screened out are loyal to the family first, ability second, plus the constraints of the great Tao oath and my care. If this can cause problems, the young patriarch will ask me. Hear this. Qin Daoxian nodded reassuringly. Qin Daochu was almost brought up by him and Qin Daoxian knew him very well. Although Qin Daochu usually behaves a little incongruously in front of him, in fact he is an extremely cautious and tenacious person. Otherwise, Qin Daoxian would not hand over the lifeblood of the future Qin family, the Institute of Magical Instruments, into his hands. Qin Daoxian has always believed that prudence and tenacity are two indispensable qualities on the road of research. Because prudence can allow researchers to discover details that are easily overlooked in the process of creating new magical instruments, while tenacity can allow researchers to not be discouraged or give up in the face of failure. As for talent, with the preaching function, it is the least important quality of all researchers in the Institute of Magical Instruments. Qin Daoxian was very relieved that the Chongping Magical Instrument Research Institute was looked after by such a person. If that's the case, I'll send you the money later. No hurry, you are busy first. When Qin Daoxian heard this, he said, Since you are not in a hurry, let's wait until the clan meeting is over. Hearing this, Qin Daochu's face suddenly collapsed. No, I said the wrong thing, we are anxious. We are so anxious. Everyone is waiting for the rice to cook. Stinky boy. Qin Daoxian pointed at him and laughed. Hey. Chapter 220? Twin Lakes Island. A huge palace stands on the plain on the island. In front of the palace, on the two lakes, one big and one small, the smoke is huge and fascinating. In the sky, one after another silhouette flew towards the palace. Look carefully. These flying monks all wore blue and white robes. Among them, those who wear white robes are monks from the Qin family, and those who wear blue robes are monks from the Blessing generation. Qin Daoxian looked at the council hall under his feet and sighed. Qin Jiangzuo's efficiency is really high. In such a short time, the family council hall was built. Hearing this, Qin Xinhe nodded and said, Building Guanhai City has allowed Beiwang and the others to accumulate rich experience, and with the help of the family monks, the speed of building the palace is naturally very fast. Speaking of which, this is the first time we have held a clan meeting in the clan's special discussion hall, right? It's the first time. Qin Xinhe sighed. Just think about it, we used to find a random place in your Lingfu courtyard to discuss family affairs. Today is different. Yes. Qin Daoxian nodded. However, speaking of Qin Jiangzhua, is he in good health now? Qin Daoxian was deeply impressed by Qin Beiwang as a hero. It can be said that the rapid development of the Qin family is inseparable from the construction team under him. The establishment of factory buildings in the industrial zone, the campus of Chongping No. 1 Xiuxin Primary School, the spiritual residence of various monks, the expansion of Chongping County, the official road of Shuanghu Island, the construction of Shuanghu Island seaport town, etc. Even the mortal city of Guanhai City on Sequoia Island was built under the leadership of Qin Beiwang. It can be said, in the Qin family, Qin Beiwang's credit is almost no lower than that of any cultivator. Looking north. Speaking of Qin Beiwang, Qin Ziyan's face was a little gloomy, and then he shook his head. What's up? Qin Daoxian frowned. A few days ago Beiwang fell ill. I went to see him. I'm afraid there is not much time left. Time is running out. Qin Daoxian frowned. How could this happen? Seeing Qin Daoxuan's sad face, Qin Xinhe patted him on the shoulder and said, Daoxian, Beiwang is a mortal person without spiritual roots. Shouyuan Ben is not even comparable to a qi-refining cultivator. Besides, with his mortal body, he couldn't bear the medicinal power of the life-extending elixir. After that, Qin Xinhe sighed and stopped talking. Hear this. Qin Daoxian said in a solemn tone, Uncle 13, after Qin Jianghu is 100 years old, I hope to move him into the family ancestral hall and enjoy the incense of the clan forever. This? Hearing Qin Daoxuan's practice of breaking the clan rules, Qin Xinhe fell silent. After a long time he sighed, It's okay, you call the shots. Thank you, Uncle 13. Qin Daoxian bowed to Qin Xinhe. Talking room. The two escaped and landed in front of the gate of the Qin family council hall. Step into the meeting hall side by side. Inside the hall, there were already more than a dozen Taoist monks and older Fuzi monks who had come to the clan meeting. The two floated up. Qin Daoxian sat at the top of the hall, and Qin Xinhe sat on the lower left of him. Glancing at everyone, Qin Daoxian announced, Since everyone is here, let's start. The words fall. Everyone held their breath and looked at Qin Daoxian. Seeing everyone looking at him, Qin Daoxian laughed. Speaking of which, our family has indeed not held a clan meeting for a while. Over the years, the family has changed a lot, not to mention you, sometimes even the young patriarch like me is overwhelmed. Hear this. The crowd laughed out loud. The rapid development of the Qin family is a fact that everyone can see. In the eyes of outsiders, the Qin family is soaring into the sky at the speed of a rocket. Although the background of the Qin family is still weak, with Qin Daoxian alone in Sangzhou, no family dares to underestimate the Qin family. After all, this is a person who can face danger without chaos under the watchful eyes of a group of Yuan Ing Jinjuan. Not to mention Qin Daoxuan's performance in the corpse tide in Sangzhou, showing his strength far beyond his cultivation. How can outsiders underestimate such a promising sword cultivator family? When everyone's laughter stopped, the atmosphere in the hall relaxed. Qin Daoxian continued, I remember that when the clan club was in the past, various departments were planned for the family. Now it seems that it is time to implement each department. Hear this. Everyone held their breath again. Over the years, due to the rapid development of the family and the improvement of the internal system, it has not been able to keep up with the speed of the family's development. This has also caused the family to be constrained in many ways. For example, the Institute of Magical Instruments has insufficient funds, but there is no one to ask for funds, which leads to the suspension of the research project, which wastes the precious time of the institute. In the past, when Qin Daoxian was in the family, these problems were naturally not problems. If any person in charge has a problem, he can find Qin Daoxian to solve it as soon as possible. But once he's not in the family, the problem came out and the entire family was actually hindered from running. In this clan meeting, Qin Daoxian will solve this problem completely. First of all, the Ministry of People's Livelihood. Qin Daoxian looked at the only mortal in the hall, who was also the magistrate of Chongping County, Qin Ji. Qin Ji. Subordinates are here. Qin Ji immediately stood up from his seat and bowed his head respectfully. Don't be nervous, sit down and talk. Qin Daoxian smiled and waved. Over the years, Magistrate Chen's contribution has been obvious to all. The family population has continued to rise, the expansion of Chongping County, and the establishment of Jianghu Island seaport town are all inseparable from Magistrate Chen's hard work. The young patriarch has won awards, these are all things that subordinates should do. Qin Ji quickly cupped his hands. Qin Daoxian nodded. So, I want Qin Ji to serve as the Minister of People's Livelihood, what do you think? Hearing this, everyone nodded. A minister of the Ministry of People's Livelihood, a thankless department, naturally everyone doesn't care much. After all, the Ministry of People's Livelihood is a department that manages mortals. No monk wants to govern mortals. But for a family, mortals are the cornerstone of the family and have to be managed. After all, the mortal group can provide a steady stream of fresh blood for the family monks. Since everyone agrees, then I announce that Qin Ji will be the family's first Minister of People's Livelihood. The words fall. Everyone bowed their hands to Qin Ji, and Qin Ji returned the salute one by one. Looking at Qin Ji, whose temples were slightly pale, Qin Daoxian couldn't help feeling that the years were not forgiving. He remembered that more than 10 years ago, Qin Ji was just a spirited middle-aged man. Now he has become an old man in his 50s. Wait until the hall is quiet again. Qin Daoxian continued, if the Ministry of People's Livelihood is the cornerstone of the family, then the Ministry of Education is the cradle of the family monks and one of the most important departments of the family. This time everyone came to the spirit. The importance of the Ministry of Education has been recognized by everyone over the years. The establishment of Chongping No. 1 Xiuxin Primary School has cultivated many talents for the family. Moreover, as the number of cultivators in the Qin family continues to grow, the school will train more cultivators for the family in the future. Foreseeable. In the future, the cultivators of Fu Zhe descendants and Shi will all be educated through schools under the Education Department, and then assigned to various positions in the family. It is conceivable how much invisible power this department has. Furthermore, in the future our Qin family must build more schools. Chongping No. 1 Xiuxin Primary School is only the first, but by no means the last. All of these tasks will require the overall planning of the Education Department in the future. As for the candidate for the minister of this department, all the elite cultivators of my Qin family are here. If you have any ideas, you can come up with them. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other in dismay, and then all showed a look of eagerness to try. But at the moment, Qin Xinhe on the side opened his mouth and said, "This old man recommended himself to serve as the Minister of Education. I wonder if I can?" Uncle 13. Old Patriarch. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian laughed and said, "Since the Patriarch is willing to serve as the Education Minister of our family, there is no problem." Qin Daoxian knew in his heart that the reason why Qin Xinhe chose to take over the education of the family cultivator was that in addition to his desire to cultivate more talents for the family, there was another reason that he did not want to be the Minister of Finance. Really? Qin Daoxian continued, "Next, it's the candidate for the Minister of Finance. The Minister of Finance, who manages the financial power of the family, can be said to be the most important power of a family in addition to personnel power and military power. For monks, finance means spiritual stones and spiritual resources. A monk may not eat or drink, but no monk can endure the days of lack of spiritual resources. This shows the power of the Minister of Finance. Since you don't speak, I will personally appoint." Qin Daoxian glanced around and finally put his eyes on Qin Daoyan and said, "Qin Daoyan, young patriarch." Qin Daoyan stood up immediately. "It's up to you to be the family's first finance minister." As she said that, a blue jade card flew into her hand. "This is the family repository for the family to store spirit stones and spirit stone coins, and I leave it to you, Patriarch." Qin Daoyan took the cyan jade card in a panic, feeling a little overwhelmed. "However, I am also responsible for the production of Chongping Pharmaceutical Factory. Can't you find a replacement for a pharmaceutical factory for so many years?" Hear this. Qin Daoyan knew that Qin Daoxian had made up his mind. In the current Qin family with Qin Daoxuan's prestige, no one can object to what he has made up his mind, including the old patriarch. "Yes." Qin Daoyan bowed and respectfully answered the order. "Next, it's the military department." When everyone heard this, they held their breath for a moment, not daring to say another word. Military power has always been the most sensitive power. Although the cultivator's great power is attributed to himself, the military power of the cultivator army has always been the most important power of the major families. Because the monks in the monk army must be the elite of the elites of each family. The same goes for the Qin family. Qin Daoxian was planning the prototype of this military department as early as several years ago. Although there are not many people in this army's prototype now. But each of them is no worse than the elite children of any family, and the best among them are even better than the direct disciples of Qin Yuan sword sect. Qin Fuxing. Qin Daoxian didn't ask everyone's opinion, but directly named him. Exist. Qin Fuxing, who had been silent all the time, stood up. At the age of 13 or 14 years old, he was particularly eye-catching among the monks of the Taoist generation. But in the field. But no monk dared to look down on him. Don't look at Qin Fuxing still polishing his infuriating energy, and he doesn't have a foundation, but in terms of strength, these foundation-building cultivators of the Qin family are not necessarily Qin Fuxing's opponents. After a few years, Qin Fuxing's foundation will be a hidden killer of the Qin family. No one except Qin Daoxian knew about Qin Fuxing's becoming a sword repairer. In the future, the strength of the Qin family's military headquarters is all the secret of the Qin family. If a force wants to survive for a long time in the world of immortality, it must not only have superficial power, but also have reserve power. The surface power is to deter those who have evil intentions, and the backup power is the backhand to truly save the forces. The current superficial power of the Qin family is his Qin Daoxian. a foundation-building cultivator comparable to the Purple Mansion. Enchen Fuxing is the power that Qin Daoxian has hidden, and in the future he will hide more and more such monks. You're here to be the minister of the army. Yes. Qin Fuxing didn't say anything, just bowed his hands and sat down silently. After the appointment of the military minister, the atmosphere in the hall eased again. Next, the candidates for the Minister of Police and the Minister of Justice. A clan will come down. Almost every Taoist monk in the Qin family has become the manager of a certain department. But among them, the two most important departments are the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of the Military. Needless to say, the Ministry of Finance is directly in charge of the family finances, which is a huge wealth of hundreds of millions every year. The military is the military guarantee of the family and is responsible for safeguarding the safety of the family. After Qin Daoxian had seen the power of the Jinhai Palace Hall Master, it completely strengthened the confidence in the implementation of the military and production separation system in the Qin family. From now on, the military cultivator in charge of the battle will focus on everything and use all methods to enhance their own strength and protect the safety of the family. The monks in charge of production research, in addition to cultivation, only need to be responsible for their own work. For example, a refiner in a Feijin factory. There is no need to study spells, comprehend sword tactics, and think about fighting with monks. It is enough to improve your level of refining. The same is true for other units such as pharmaceutical factories and schools. Although the monks have mastered extraordinary power, Qin Daoxian knows that the gap between monks and monks is huge. Like him. Showing the sword chi rain curtain, how many ordinary chi refining cultivators come to die? When the strength reaches a certain level, quantity cannot make up for the gap in quality at all. And the route that the Qin family is going to take is the route of elite powerhouses. This is also the reason why there are only dozens of people in the Kendo class so far. Qin Daoxian will also adopt the last elimination system in the military in the future to ensure that the monks who enter the military will not slack off. The candidates for the Minister of Foreign Trade and the Ministry of Commerce, for the time being, you should be Dao Lin. Yes. A young monk in white clothes stood up and said respectfully. After more than half an hour of appointment, Qin Daoxian finally roughly finalized the real managers of the various departments of the family. Don't be too happy, everyone. Qin Daoxian looked at the excited faces of everyone and said with a smile, although you are all managers of various departments now, some of your departments are just empty shells, and you have to build them yourself. Of course, the manpower problem needs to be solved by yourself. There are so many cultivators in the family. Whether they are willing to enter the department you manage depends on your eloquence. Ha ha ha. Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. After the clan is over, get out of the hall. Qin Daoxian was about to leave with Qin Xinhe, but was stopped by someone. Young Patriarch, please stay. Behind him, there was an urgent voice. Chapter 221, Heard. Qin Daoxian and Qin Xinhe stopped. He turned to look at Qin Daolin, who was chasing after the two of them. Qin Daolin quickly walked in front of the two of them, glanced at the people who flew away, bowed his hands and said, I have seen the young patriarch, the patriarch. Don't be too polite. Qin Daoxian waved his hand. Daolin, what's the matter with you looking for me? Heard. Qin Daolin, dressed in white, looked a little hesitant. Tell me, what are you hiding from us? Qin Xinhe on the side stroked his beard and smiled. Yes. Young patriarch, patriarch. Qin Daolin's eyes finally settled down. I have some doubts. It stands to reason that Brother Daochuan was the first to take over the business of Feijin store in Xianqing of Guang'an Prefecture, and then he was in charge of various business affairs of the family. Why not make him the Minister of Foreign Trade and Commerce? At least, he should also be the head of one of them, right? Just for this. That's it. Qin Daolin nodded. Uncle 13, this kid is still fighting for Daochuan. Qin Daoxian smiled at this Qin Xian. Immediately he looked at Qin Daolin. Don't think too much, although it seems that you are the head of the two departments, it seems that you have great power, but in the end, these two departments are empty shells. Moreover, your most important job, I also made it clear to you at the family meeting, that is to organize the foreign trade department. This part of the work also coincides with the work in your Zhangzhou Business Alliance. Hear this. Qin Daolin suddenly became enlightened but then frowned. That Daochuan. He naturally has more important jobs. Don't you think that the responsibilities of the governor of the Chongping Central Bank are very light? This? Qin Daolin looked at Qin Daoxian and Qin Xinhe and scratched his head awkwardly. Go. Yes, young patriarch. Qin Daolin breathed a sigh of relief when he learned that the young patriarch did not neglect Qin Daochuan because of him. Watching Qin Daolin leave, Qin Xinhe praised, "What a loving and righteous good boy just like you." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian touched the tip of his nose and smiled bitterly. "Uncle 13, am I so reckless?" "What do you say?" Qin Xinhe looked at him with a smile. Qin Daoxian smiled helplessly, and immediately disappeared together, rolled up him and Qin Xinhe, and flew towards the clan. Send Qin Xinhe to Hui Ethnic Studies. Qin Daoxian pondered for a moment and flew towards Chongping County. With his escape speed and dozens of breaths, Chongping County was in sight. Looking at the county seat in front of him, which was prostrate on the ground and expanded by nearly 100 times, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but sigh. The current Chongping County is a lot more lively. As Qin Daoxian sighed. Under the governance of Qin Ji, Chongping County has developed rapidly in just over 10 years. The first is its urban area. In the past, the area of Chongping County was only about 1 kilometer in radius. And now, the urban area alone has reached a radius of 4 or 5 kilometers. In terms of population, thanks to the family's unconditional financial support, Qin's population has exploded. In just 10 years, the total population of the Qin clan on Jianghu Island has grown from more than 3,000 people to more than 300,000 people today, and the population increase has reached a terrifying 100 times. Moreover, nearly 70% of the population is concentrated in Chongping County. Keep growing at this rate. 15 years at most. The population of the Qin family can reach millions, and within 30 years the population of the Qin family can even reach tens of millions, which is not inferior to any big family in Sangzhou. Of course, just having enough people is not enough. But if a family wants to develop, it cannot do without a population. Because immortal seedlings with spiritual roots are born from mortals. Without the foundation of mortals, there will be no prosperity of the immortal family. At this point, whether it is the Xiuxin family or the sect, it is the same. The consciousness unfolded, and Qin Daoxian quickly locked the location of Qin Baiwang's house. Qin Daoxian, who was hovering in the air, flashed and flew towards Qin Baiwang's home. Below. Seeing the Qin clan flying over their heads, their faces did not change as if a cultivator was flying over their heads, which was quite normal, and did not cause panic or disturbance. It can be said. In terms of the atmosphere between monks and mortals, there is no family in Wanxinghai that can compare to the Qin family. Benefit from the magic factory and the pharmaceutical factory. The monks and mortals worked together all day, and everyone's attitude toward the monks gradually changed from awe to closeness. The reason why mortals are afraid of monks is, in the final analysis, because they are afraid of the power mastered by monks. The idea that Qin Daoxian instilled for the Qin family cultivator from below is to protect the Qin clan. Coupled with the fact that they work together all day, the two naturally become one. Even with other Qin clan members, they no longer fear the Qin family cultivator, but respect. This shift is imperceptible. Maybe no one except Qin Daoxian has noticed this subtle change. But Qin Daoxian knew that in a big family the monks of the family must have faith. If there is no belief and only relying on the blood relationship, the cohesion of the family cultivator is very low. Only when everyone has a common belief can they fight for the same goal and die. Just like the original Yang family. After the death of the cultivator of the Zifu family, the hearts of the people became disorganized like a mass of loose sand. The reason for this is that the Yang family cultivator has no faith. The bond of unity between them is only blood kinship. But in the end, how deep is the blood relationship between the monks in a family that has reproduced for hundreds of thousands of years? In addition to having the same surname and the same ancestor. Two unrelated Yang family cultivators may have a blood relationship so weak that they are almost no different from outsiders. Is this bond really reliable? Unreliable. Especially after the family has passed down for thousands of years, or even 10,000 years. This kind of blood ties will become weaker and weaker. At that time, the family is not so much a family as it is a nation. The blood between the clansmen is so thin that it can be ignored. Since the bloodline is not enough to maintain the Xiuxin family, what should we rely on to maintain the unity of this family? By faith. In other words, rely on spiritual inheritance. The belief established by Qin Daoxian for the Qin family cultivator is to protect the Qin clan. In order to strengthen the belief of the clan, Qin Daoxian used the power of education to brainwash the people of the Qin clan since they were children. Not only the cultivators of the Qin family, but even ordinary mortal students, will also receive this kind of family loyalty education. In the future, even in order to make this education more full and expressive, Qin Daoxian also plans to write a family history for the family. A united family cannot be without family history. It is possible that other families will also record some of the major events in the family. But it will never be a family history in the form of a combination of biographies and major events like Qin Daoxian. And Qin Beiwang was the first person Qin Daoxian wanted to be included in the history of the Qin clan. Everyone has desires. Mortals have them, even more so for monks. The desires of mortals are very simple: material desires, spiritual desires. In the Qin family, satisfying material desires is very simple. With Qin's welfare policy, even a lazy clan will not starve to death on the street because of laziness. As for spiritual desires, it is nothing more than the satisfaction brought by power and the fame that the Qin clan prefers. And the peak of the name is naturally recorded by the family history for all the descendants of the Qin family to look up to. If mortals leave a name for their family history, it will also allow the cultivators of the Qin family in later generations to maintain respect for the mortal group, killing two birds with one stone. Similarly, the Qin family cultivator will compile a family history based on what he has done in his life after he sits down. Chongping County East Block. There are many officials' homes in the county. Squeak. A scarlet door studded with copper nails opened. The next moment, a haggard-looking young woman walked out of the door. Behind the young woman, there were two maids in green gauze. Just as Qin Jiao walked to the front of the cloud-treading beast car, she looked forward and stopped. Seeing her young lady in a daze, the maid behind her reminded softly, Miss. Qin Jiao heard the call in her ear but turned a deaf ear. She quickly walked to a young man in white clothes and immediately prepared to kneel down. Li Hua said with rain. Qin Jiao pays respects to the young patriarch. Get up. Hear the call. Everyone reacted one after another, and they all made a gesture to kowtow to Qin Daoxian, meet the young patriarch. But they found that no one could kneel down. Don't be too polite. I'm here to visit Elder Qin. What should you do? Qin Daoxian waved his hand, then looked at Qin Jiao and said, Come on, show me your grandfather. Qin Jiao nodded vigorously. After a cup of tea, Qin Daoxian met Qin Beiwang on the sickbed in the backyard. Looking at Qin Beiwang, who was dying on the sickbed, Qin Daoxian sighed. My father has been saying a few days ago that he couldn't see the young patriarch before his death. It's a pity. Behind Qin Daoxian, a middle-aged man wept. Dad, look who came to see you. Open your eyes and take a look. It's the young patriarch. The young patriarch is here to see you, Dad. In the house. When Qin Beiwang's family heard the cry, they all wept softly. Seeing this scene, Qin Daoxian was also a little sad in his heart. He couldn't help thinking of Qin Xianhe. Although he had extended his life for Qin Xianhe for 30 years, plus his own lifespan, Qin Xianhe still had at least 40 or 50 years of lifespan. But unable to build a foundation, Qin Xianhe is destined to turn into a handful of loss in a few decades. It seems that after hearing the words of the young patriarch, Qin Beiwang reacted. His eyelids trembled slightly. Father. Father. Qin Beiwang's eldest son burst into tears. Qin Daoxian looked at the crowd and said, You must be mentally prepared to see Mr. Chen for the last time. Done. Qin Daoxian waved his hand, and Qin Beiwang suddenly opened his eyes as if returning to the light. Not only that, he miraculously sat up. Young patriarch. A ruddy flashed across Qin Beiwang's face. He looked at Qin Daoxian and said in surprise, You're back? The old man thought he couldn't see you before he left. Qin Daoxian patted the other's palm as dry as bark and said with a smile, Of course not. Qin Beiwang nodded, tears welling up in his cloudy eyes. Look, Mr. Chen, what did I bring you? Qin Daoxian patted the storage bag and took out a paper book from it. After writing for so long, I finally caught up. After he finished speaking, he handed over the book, which was no more than half an inch thick. Qin Beiwang took the book, fixed his eyes and muttered, The biography of Qin Beiwang, young patriarch, this. He raised his head and looked at Qin Daoxian in disbelief. Look, what's wrong with it? Aha. Qin Beiwang burst into tears, nodding while wiping away his tears. With trembling hands he kept flipping through his biographies, his tears never stopped and he kept saying, Death without regrets. Old mortals die without regrets. Say it. He actually made a gesture to get up and kowtow to Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian quickly held him down, patted his hand and said, Old Qin, is there anything else you want to explain to your family? Hear this. Then Qin Beiwang looked at his eldest son and said, From here, come here. Father. The middle-aged man approached the sickbed and knelt down in front of the sickbed. After I leave, you have to take good care of this family. I don't ask you to be very promising. I just hope that you can take good care of your family and contribute to the family, remember? Remember? I remember, Dad. The middle-aged man burst into tears and said hoarsely. Unfortunately, the old man can't see Yang child. While speaking, Qin Baiwang's breath became weaker and weaker until he completely let go of Qin Daoxuan's hand. Father! Master! Grandfather! Inside the house, there were continuous cries. Qin Daoxian looked at the scene in front of him and couldn't help remembering what Zhou Mubai said to him back then. As a cultivator, you have to get used to the people around you gradually leaving you. You must know that not every relative has such a gift as you. Daoxian, life and death are impermanent. Master, master, the little lady is born. Master, the little miss is born, master. Outside the house, an elderly old housekeeper, holding a child in his arms, rushed into the house with brisk strides. But seeing a scene of weeping, I couldn't help falling to my knees and sobbing, Master. When Qin Daoxian saw the child in his arms, he seemed to sense something and walked towards him. He saw Qin Daoxian walking towards him. The old butler did not dare to neglect and hurriedly bent over and said, Young patriarch. As soon as he raised his hand, the baby girl flew towards him slowly. Qin Daoxian held the baby girl in one hand, took out the spiritual test plate with the other hand, and tested the spiritual root for the baby girl. Next moment, the whole house was filled with rays of light, and eventually the rays of light shot up into the sky. Tianlingen. Qin Daoxuan's voice trembled slightly. Unexpectedly, Qin Baiwang's first Tianlingen cultivator appeared in Qin Baiwang's home. Southwest waters of Wuxia. A petite figure quickly swam in the direction of Jianghu Island. Take a closer look. This petite figure is actually a fishtail, and the cultivation base is as high as the 9th floor of the foundation, and it is only one step away to reach the cultivation base of Zifu. Looking at her pretty face, who is not Luo Li from the mermaid clan. But at this moment, Luo Li's brows were furrowed, and her pretty face was full of anxiety. It seemed that something great was happening. Luo Li never went directly to Jianghu Island to find Qin Daoxian. Generally, when Luo Li came to him, he used the scale of life to contact Qin Daoxian in advance. The two met after an agreed time and place. But this time, Luo Li ignored it and headed straight for Jianghu Island. Chapter 222. Twin Lakes Island Harbor. Qin Daoxian looked at Luo Li, who was quite anxious in front of him, and said in surprise, What's wrong? Something happened, something happened. Luo Li said, her pretty face was full of panic. Hurt. Qin Daoxuan's face gradually sank. Qinyuan Sword Sect. An immortal palace stands on the cloudy clouds. At the end of the field of vision, a silver horse was trained like a river of 9 heavens, flowing down mightily. Inside Asgard. The sect master of Qinyuan Jianzong, who closed his eyes and meditated, suddenly opened his eyes and frowned slightly. What's wrong? Next moment, a young figure appeared in front of her. It is the Lord of Jinhai Palace. Sister, something happened. After listening to the narration of the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace, Feikings's eyes were solemn, and there was a faint threatening power in her eyes. You mean 3 new channels were added all at once? Yes. The Hall Master of Jinhai Palace nodded solemnly. He cupped his hands. Senior sister, since the first Otherworld channel appeared on the seabed of Wuxia 600 years ago, there have been 6 so far, you say? Will this Wuxia be the second 2 worlds? Deep. Hearing the word 2 worlds, Feikings's heart jumped. According to the records in the sect, before the 2 realms were completely formed in the ancient times, there were passages first, and finally these passages were connected together. The words of the Hall Master of Jinhai Palace immediately made the quiet needle drop in the immortal palace audible. A long time. Fei Qinshua said firmly, No matter what, Wanxinghai is the foundation of my Qinyuan Sword Sect. Even if it is the new Liangjiyuan, my Qinyuan Sword Sect has no other way but to resist. However, before that, we need to take Zenangwan and reconsolidate our defense line in Izumo. Senior sister, isn't it? The world demon is the common enemy of the Xiuxian world. How dare the Shenqing Dao Alliance attack us at this time? Hard to say. Fei Qinshua shook her head and sighed. Don't forget, how did my Qinyuan Sword Sect escape to Wuxia? Since the end of the ancient times, after the human race sects have been established, how can there be among the various cultivation forces? Faithful. Hear this. The Hall Master of Jinhai Palace remained silent. Wuxia underwater world. Qin Daoxian stared at the bright sea of stars above his head. dazed. A jade hand waved in front of him. Why are you in a daze? Nothing. Qin Daoxian retracted his gaze, looked at Luo Li with a strange face in front of him and smiled. Let's go. Lori nodded. Immediately, the two flew in the direction of Demon Monkey Mountain together. After a few hours, the Demon Mountains are already in sight. Before arriving at Demon Ape Mountain from a distance, Luo Shiyuan, the head of the Merman clan, led a group of clan elders to wait outside. Patriarch Luo. Flying to the crowd, Qin Daoxian bowed to Luo Shiyuan. Lord. Seeing Qin Daoxian, Luo Shiyuan said with an excited expression, Luo Mao, for the people who were released by the Zhou family, thank the Lord for the grace. Talking. Luo Shiyuan was about to bow down, but was supported by Qin Daoxian. Patriarch Luo doesn't have to be like this. The Mare people are an affiliated race of my Qin family. This move is also due. Anyway, my Mare people are willing to die for the Qin family in the future. Luo Shiyuan was decisive. Obviously. Qin Daoxian believed in his words, and rescued all the mermen captured by the Zhou family, making the entire merman clan grateful. Qin Daoxian could see it. All the mermaids, including Luo Li, looked at him with an inexplicable meaning. Patriarch Luo, the words of gratitude will be discussed later. He paused. I don't know, where is the otherworld passage you said? Hear this. Luo Zeyuan's face suddenly became serious. Lord, please come with me. Okay. Qin Daoxian nodded. After a stick of incense, the group of people came to the depths of the Mo Yuan mountain range. I see. A circular gap appeared in the valley. There are tiny space cracks around this circular gap, and it is dark inside, and I don't know where it leads. See this scene. Qin Daoxian frowned. He turned to look at Luo Shiyuan and asked, Patriarch Luo, have you sent someone to investigate and confirm? My lord, it has been confirmed. Luo Shiyuan nodded. Across the passage is the real demon world. Hear this. Qin Daoxian's breathing became rapid. True demon world. Qin Daoxian clenched his fists lightly. No wonder the disciple of Qinyuan Sword Sect who came to receive him last time went to Qinyuan Sword Sect, and when he talked about the world demon, his words were veiled. It turned out that Wan Xinghai had already appeared in the real demon world channel. Qinyuan Jianzong has been blocking the news. If it wasn't for this passage appearing in Mo Yuan Mountain, and Luo Shiyuan chose to report to the Qin family as soon as possible, Qin Daoxian was still in the dark at the moment. For Qinyuan Jianzong's behavior of blocking news, Qin Daoxian can understand how terrifying the strength of the real demon world is. You can see the tragic war between the two sides in the two worlds for hundreds of thousands of years. Qinyuan Jianzong escaped from a local sect in Xianyunzhu to Wangxinghai. After all, it is also related to the real demon world. 2,000 years ago, Izumo Kingdom was still the territory of Qinyuan Sword Sect at that time. That year, the world demon invaded, and a war broke out between the two sides in Liangjiyuan. The previous suzerain of Qinyuan Sword Sect raised his sect to help Liangjiyuan. In this battle, although the Xiuxian realm resisted the invasion of the realm demon, but all the sects that participated in the war suffered heavy losses, as did the Qinyuan Sword Sect. Unexpectedly, Zhuanyangzong and Qinghui Taoist faction joined forces to attack the country of Yunyun while the elites of Qinyuan Jianzong died. Qinyuan Jianzong was defeated and fled to Wangxinghai with the remaining forces. After more than 1,000 years of silent development, Qinyuan Jianzong, whose vitality was restored, launched a war and brought Wangxinghai under his command. This history is almost known, because the slogan of Qinyuan Jianzong's attack on Chuyun is to regain the homeland. As for why Qinyuan Jianzong was so brutal in the process of recovering his homeland, it was also related to the fact that the people left behind in Izumo were basically the forces that betrayed Qinyuan Jianzong. When Qinyuan Jianzong fled, the family forces loyal to it all chose to flee to Wangxinghai with Qinyuan Jianzong. Only those renegades and grasshoppers stayed in Izumo. For the descendants of these people, Qinyuan Jianzong is naturally not polite, and it can be said that it is not soft to kill. Indulge for a moment. Qin Daoxian looked at Luo Shiyuan and said, Patriarch Luo, where are the clansmen you sent to the opposite side? Wait, my lord. Luo Shio bowed his hands. Moment. A young shark flew over. Looking at his face, he looked like a young man in his 20s. It's just that the cultivation base has reached the initial stage of foundation building. Qin Daoxian knew that a monk could not judge his age by his appearance. The merman in front of him might be even older than his 13th uncle. Of course, when a monk cultivates to a certain level, age basically loses its meaning. For example, the 300-year-old Jindan cultivator and the nearly 200-year-old foundation-building cultivator, who is younger. The results are obvious. Lord. Seeing Qin Daoxian, the young merman hurriedly bowed his hands. Qin Daoxian asked, "Let me ask you, have you seen the environment across the passage?" "I see." The young merman nodded. Across the passage is a cave, which is very similar to the environment on land. If there is any difference, the spiritual energy there is very rich, much richer than the spiritual energy on the land of Wangxinghai. The young merman said while recalling. The Qin Daoxian inquired about the surrounding terrain in detail, and even asked him to enter the specific terrain into the jade slip before letting the other party leave. Watch the young shark leave. Qin Daoxian turned his head to look at Luo Shiyuan, and said, "Patriarch Luo, you just said that this space passage is not stable enough for people with cultivation levels above the foundation building stage to pass through, right?" "Right." Luo Shiyuan nodded. "I originally planned to investigate it myself, but when I walked to the passage, I felt an indescribable sense of panic in my heart. Qin Daoxian immediately understood that this was the monk's foreknowledge of the danger. Generally speaking, the higher the cultivator, the stronger the ability to predict danger. Therefore, a monk with a low cultivation base may still be attacked by a sneak attack, and a high-level monk is very difficult to be attacked by a sneak attack, unless the sneak attacker uses some kind of secret technique, which blinds the monk's prediction of danger. Only the foundation establishment cultivator can pass through. Qin Daoxian frowned and thought secretly. He now has two options. First, report the real Demon World channel to Qinyuan Jianzong. In this way the safety is safe, but no matter what gains are made in the real Demon World, it basically has nothing to do with the Qin family. Second, hide the secrets of the passage and explore alone. Doing so is extremely risky. If you encounter the demon master of the real Demon World, it is also possible that the team that went to explore will be wiped out. But again, the benefits of doing so are terrifying. It is different from the cultivation resources of the immortal world that are occupied by the major cultivation forces. In the real world of demons, the resources needed for the cultivation of the demons are completely different from those of the monks in the cultivation world. This also led to the environment of the real demon world is similar to the wild times in the ancient times of this world, and all kinds of rare resources that are extinct in this world emerge in an endless stream. The only dangerous place is the ruler of the real demon world, the real demon. Little thought was given to it. Qin Daoxian chose the second option. Conceal the passage and explore alone. Patriarch Luo. Lord. Luo Shiyuan cupped his hands and stood respectfully. I'm going to go and explore it myself. No, Lord. Before Qin Daoxian finished speaking, Luo Shiyuan hurriedly dissuaded him. According to the records in our clan, the ferocity of the real demon world is far beyond what the monsters in this world can compare to. Although both world monsters and monster beasts have the same word for monsters, they are completely different. Oh, what's the difference? Due to the shallow background, the Qin family knew very little of the secrets that many big clans knew. Just like the two realms and the real demon realm. Although Qin Daoxian had heard of these terms before, he had no idea what the specific situation was. He only knew that the world demon, like the evil spirit, was the common enemy of all monks. As for the specific reasons, Qin Daoxian knew little. Lord, Luo Shiyuan paused, you must have seen the monsters in the Wangxinghai. They are powerful and generally born with racial talents, but compared with the elites of monks they are far inferior. Qin Daoxian thought that after he succeeded in establishing the foundation, he strangled dozens of ape-like monsters with a single sword, and nodded in agreement. In his opinion, monster beasts who do not have magic tools and do not practice magic really have no chance of winning against human monks with excellent magic tools. Qin Xinhe warned him to be careful of monsters. Also from his own perspective. For a loose cultivator who lacks even attack-like magical tools, a monster with a powerful physical body is naturally extremely powerful, and it is very difficult to kill the monster when the loose cultivator unites. But for the real cultivator family and the elite disciples of the sect, the monsters are very weak, and can even be said to be vulnerable. With the same level of cultivation, the elite disciples of the Xiuxin family and the sect, there is not much difference between killing monsters and chopping melons and vegetables. Ancient times. In that era when there were almost no magic weapons, the human race could still win the war against monsters, let alone now. But the world demon is different. Luo Ziyuan's face was extremely serious. The world monster is not only physically strong, The most important thing is that the cultivation system of the world monster is completely different from the human race and monster beasts. He paused. Whether it's a human race or a monster, our cultivation path can be summed up as self-cultivation within and the avenue outside, but the world monsters are different. Their path of cultivation is to strengthen the inner world. The physical body is used as a world to grow, so we call it a world monster. Take the body as a world. When Qin Daoxian heard this unheard of practice path, he couldn't help but become interested. It sounds a bit interesting. No, it's a wicked way, Luo Shiyuan shook his head. The world monsters do not rely on spiritual energy to cultivate their inner world, but the spirituality of living beings. They believe that only by devouring the spirituality of living beings can they strengthen their inner world. The stronger the living beings, the stronger their spirituality. Hear this. Qin Daoxian frowned. You mean? They eat people. Luo Ziyuan's face was solemn. Not only people but all kinds of monsters are also in their recipes. They swallow the living beings into the inner world, refining the spirituality of the living beings so as to strengthen the inner world. Hear this. Qin Daoxian only felt his scalp go numb. Ancient times. Although the monsters also feed on the human race, they use the human race as a snack more than a cultivation resource. But the demons are different. According to Luo Shiyuan, whether it is monsters or humans, they are all resources for their cultivation. The difference here is huge. In other words, the world monster sees the human race, and the mentality of the human race after seeing the spirit stone is similar. And unlike spirit stones, humans can reproduce. No wonder, it will be named True Demon Realm. Qin Daoxian muttered. So Lord, don't take any risk. Luo Shiyuan persuaded. Patriarch Luo, don't worry, of course I won't risk myself. Qin Daoxian stretched out his hand and a small blue flag was suspended in his palm. Look at it. This is... Luo Shiyuan looked at the small blue flag in front of him and wondered. This is Michin Banner. Michin Banner. Luo Shiyuan exclaimed in surprise. How could Luo Shiyuan not know the name of Michin Fan, the real person of God? But how could Michin Fan fall into the Lord's hands? Luo Shiyuan was very puzzled. You can rest assured. After a while, I will set a spatial coordinate at the entrance of the passage. If there is any danger, Michin Fan will bring me back. Hear this. Luo Ziyuan's dangling heart was relieved. Although the world demon is terrifying, the human race monks are not vulnerable, otherwise the two sides would not have faced each other for hundreds of thousands of years in the two worlds. Chapter 223, True Demon World. Diyuan Qingzhou. Above the official road, a Taoist man in white riding a donkey slowly walked towards the state city of Qingzhou. This person is none other than Qin Daoxian from Wanxinghai. Qin Daoxian has been in the real demon world for several days. It is completely different from the imagined monsters. After this period of understanding, Qin Daoxian discovered that this world not only has human races, but also developed civilization. This is completely different from what he originally imagined, the human race being kept in captivity by the demons and eaten. New arrivals. Qin Daoxian did not dare to use the escape light at will in this world, so as not to provoke prying eyes. So he pretended to be a Taoist Yufeng and walked along the official road of the Yuan dynasty, inquiring about news and collecting useful information. Approaching the state city, the official road gradually became lively. On both sides of the official road, as the number of vendors selling refreshments continues to increase, it gradually becomes crowded with people. Jianghu City. Raising his head, Qin Daoxian glanced at the lettering on the city wall, patted the donkey's butt and called out, "Come on, let's go in." The donkey under his seemed to be able to understand human nature, and he heard the words and headed towards the city gate. In no time, Qin Daoxian, who paid the entrance tax, successfully entered the prefecture city of Qingzhou, Jianghu City. Entering the city, I randomly found the inn where I stayed. Qin Daoxian ordered a pot of sake and a few small dishes, and began to drink slowly. Inside the inn, the voices of the diners are endless, and their language is different from Wanxinghai, a completely different language. Qin Daoxian knew that this was Daiwan's official language. These days, he has already used the ecstasy technique to understand this Mandarin from ordinary Dayuan people. Have you heard? How many experts came to Qin Yanghe's monster slaying event this time? Oh. Hearing this, one of the diners at the same table said in surprise, "Apart from our Qingzhou sword saint, are there any other masters here?" Of course. The face of the diners who spoke first was full of pride. This time, in addition to Juggernaut and his old man, the palace master of Lianhua Palace is also here, as well as the Taoist Yushin. These are all masters of the flesh-derived realm. Qin Daoxian, who was sitting by the window, heard the words monster-slaying festival and flesh and blood, and his heart moved slightly. He stood up slowly, walked towards several diners talking about this topic. Everyone, you are polite. Qin Daoxian bowed towards the crowd. The Taoist is polite. The diners saw that Qin Daoxian was wearing a Taoist robe and could not see the depth of his cultivation. I just heard what you all said about the Qingyanghe demon-slaying festival. Can you tell me in detail? Qin Daoxian immediately smiled and said loudly, "Little heir, add some more wine and vegetables to this table." Coming. The shop assistant trotted over at a brisk pace when he heard the sound. A moment of effort. After restocking the table with wine and dishes, the diners started chatting again. Looking at the appearance of the Taoist priest, this is the first time to participate in the Qingyang River Demon Slayer Festival, right? Right? Qin Daoxian nodded. That's right. The diners laughed and said, the monster-slaying event in Qingzhou is held every 10 years, and this event is even more powerful than the previous ones. Not only the Juggernaut and his old man came in person, but even the palace master of Lianhua Palace and the Taoist Yenshin came. It seems that the monsters to be repelled this time should not be underestimated. Yes. That's right. Everyone nodded in agreement. Of course, the monster-slaying event is a grand event for experts like Juggernaut, but for ordinary people like me, it is extremely dangerous. If you are not careful, you will be swallowed by demons. When the diners said this, they shook their heads. Qin Daoxian agreed on the surface, but his heart turned upside down. This real demon world is getting weirder and weirder. Judging from what Qin Daoxian has learned, the situation where the demons confronted the monks in the Xiuxin realm in Liangjiyuan, it is definitely not something that these mortals in Qingzhou can resist. But when they talk about demons, although their faces are full of fear, they are more excited. Could it be that the demons in their mouths are not the same thing as world demons? Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian frowned. Perhaps. It is related to the flesh derivative realm that the other party just said. The term derived from flesh and blood did not come from the qi refining cultivator. To be precise, it should come from the body refining cultivator in the ancient times. It's just that in today's Wuxia, the number of body refining cultivators is rare. Few people know about the division of the body refining realm. Coincidentally, Qin Daoxian is half of physical cultivation. The reason why it is said to be half is because the dragon python swallowing heaven technique that he practiced has now stagnated. It's not that the Qin family can't supply Lingmi. But when he had reached his realm, ordinary Lingmi, no matter how many, would not have much effect on Qin Daoxian. Unless you eat more advanced Lingmi. Only. High-level Lingmi is extremely difficult to cultivate. In Wuxia, the immortal races are not enough for their own use, so how can they be sold to the outside world? Chat room. Qin Daoxian finally figured out what the so-called Qingyanghe demon beheading was all about. The Qingyang River in Qingzhou is a tributary of the Dayuan Emperor River. Every 10 years, the Dijiang River in Dayuan will set off a wave of demons, and then the demon tide will travel along the Dijiang River and its branches throughout the entire Dayuan territory. Every time, everywhere in Dayuan, there will be a steady stream of masters who come to slay monsters. This is the origin of the Qingyang River Demon Slaying Festival. Push the cup to change the room. Except for Qin Daoxian, everyone's faces were flushed. I don't know when Qingyanghe's monster slaying event will be held? Hiccup in 3 days. Diners were burping and getting drunk. Thank you, the poor road won't bother you, everyone please take it easy. Say it. Qin Daoxian stood up and left. Everyone watched Qin Daoxian leave, paused, and immediately began to eat and drink nonsense. The atmosphere was very lively. Leave the wine table. Qin Daoxian's doubts deepened. Even if it is physical cultivation, it is logically impossible to be an opponent of the demon, after all, although the realm derived from flesh and blood is stronger than his physical body. But a pure body cultivation in the flesh derivative realm is no match for a foundation-building monk who takes the path of qi refining. Although flesh derivative claims to be able to regenerate from a severed limb, each time it is reborn from a severed limb, it also consumes a lot of physical fitness. In addition, the physical training's attack methods are relatively simple, and it is not an opponent for the qi cultivator. Not to mention the entire Qingzhou, there are only 3 flesh derivative realm masters participating in the monster slaying event, which is only equivalent to 3 foundation establishment cultivators. These physical cultivators wanted to fight against the demons, and Qin Daoxian didn't believe anything. In the room, Qin Daoxian opened the window. Looking through the lights of thousands of households outside the window, looking at Qin Yanghe passing around the city, he murmured, "Is this a monster-slaying event or a human-slaughtering event?" According to those diners during the day, demons are extremely difficult to kill, and every time a monster-slaying event has to be sacrificed, many experts must be sacrificed in order to defeat the demons temporarily. Of course, these masters who survived the monster-slaying event will be admired by all parties. For example, the Sword Saint of Qingzhou has gone through 3 monster-slaying events, repelling the monsters 3 times in total, and defending the safety of Yeyang City. Therefore, every time the people of Yeyang City mentioned the Sword Saint of Qingzhou, they would unconsciously give a thumbs up. Chapter 224. Qinyang River, as the most famous tributary of the Dijiang River in Diyuan, is more than several hundred kilometers wide and tens of thousands of kilometers long, although it is a tributary of the Dijiang River. But Qinyang's popularity is not low in Diyuan. 3 days later, when Qin Daoxian rushed to the bank of Qinyang River, the 2 sides of the strait were already full of powerhouses who came to participate in the monster-slaying event. Qin Daoxian silently watched the scene in front of him without saying a word. Use the breath-holding technique. Qin Daoxian stood in the crowd like an ordinary body cultivator, not attracting attention at all. River estuary. On a towering altar with a diameter of about 100 meters, stood a group of people wearing black official robes. The leader was a middle-aged man with ruthless eyes. Next to the middle-aged man stood 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman. A man on the far left, nearly 50 years old, carrying a long sword and wearing a blue shirt, stood there, exuding an unstoppable aura. Next to the man carrying the long sword is an old Taoist with a heavy face and a childish face, but this old Taoist's muscular and knotted figure destroys his immortal style of painting. The woman beside Lao Dao was wearing a bamboo hat and a light gauze on her face. She couldn't see her face clearly, and she could only see her graceful figure under her clothes. See these 3. Qin Daoxian's eyes narrowed slightly. Even though he was separated by thousands of meters, he could still feel the strong aura on the opponent's body like the scorching sun. This breath is completely different from the monks who take the path of qi refining. The 3 of them stood there like 3 huge furnaces, emitting a scorching aura. Qin Daoxian knew. These 3 must be the Qingzhou Sword Saint, Yenshin Taoist and Linghua Palace Master mentioned by the diners in the inn. Flesh-derived realm. This is a physical cultivation level that even he has not been able to achieve. Although the path Qin Daoxian took was the path of qi refining, it did not mean that physical refining was not important. On the contrary, the physique of the monk is very important. Not to mention the other reasons why cultivators in the qi refining period often eat spiritual rice, not for the purpose of warming up and strengthening the body, and preparing for the successful foundation building in the future. The foundation establishment cultivator broke through the purple mansion, and also had very high requirements on the physical body. In order to transform the true essence into higher quality mana, it is necessary to require the qi and the physical body of the foundation establishment cultivator to reach the standard. Otherwise, the physical body is not strong enough, and the moment when the true essence transforms into mana is also the time when the physical body collapses. As for the condensation of golden pills, the requirements for the cultivator's body are even higher. Leaving aside the rigid requirements for the cultivator's physical body during the process of condensing the golden pill for the time being, let's just say that the lightning calamity after condensing the golden pill, if the physical strength and recovery ability are insufficient, it will be blasted into ashes by the thunder calamity in minutes. Brother, please disturb me. A young man beside Qin Daoxian cupped his hands and said, I don't know who the official next to Qingzhou Sword Saint is. Suddenly being questioned, the young man's face was quite impatient. But when he met Qin Daoxian's gaze, the young man shivered instinctively, and hurriedly cupped his hands. The Taoist is very polite, that is Mr. Wu from the inspection department, who is supervising my Qingzhou master to slay monsters. You still need to supervise the demon beheading? Qin Daoxian frowned. Hearing this, the young man looked at Qin Daoxian with a surprised expression. Does the Taoist know? Do not know what is this? Seeing that Qin Daoxian's expression didn't look like a fake, the young man shook his head. Qingzhou kills monsters every year and there will be heavy casualties. If there is no one to supervise the battle, who would come to kill the monster? Heard? Qin Daoxian thought, heavy casualties? How serious? The young man laughed at himself. Not many injuries but too many deaths. Every time the monster slaying event, 6,000 out of 10 masters will die. To die so much? Qin Daoxuan's pupils shrank. The young man stretched out his hand, pointed to the front and said, "Did you see that high platform?" Qin Daoxian nodded slightly. Everyone said that it was simply an altar. Every 10 years, we have to sacrifice a large number of living people to the demons. Sacrificing the living, do you mean the master who came to slay the demon? Hear this. The young man sneered, "What kind of experts are we? Although it's my first time to participate in the monster slaying festival, but over the years I have never killed a monster, and every time the monster eats and drinks, slaps and leaves." Speaking of this, the young man lowered his voice, "I feel that we are not here to kill the monsters but to feed the monsters." Really? No one is a fool. Qin Daoxian can see the problem at a glance, how can others not see it? If that's the case, why don't you run away? Qin Daoxian frowned. Escape? Where to escape? The young man raised his head and laughed at himself. Once the demons can't eat enough people, they will rush to the river bank and slaughter the city. There is one thing that the inspection division is right. What we are doing is to protect ordinary people. Then again, the same goes for escaping elsewhere. This kind of monster slaying event will be held in every city. It is held once every 10 years when the time interval is relatively long, and it is held almost every year when the time interval is short. Oh, by the way, the demon slaying event is not without benefits at all. After every time the demon is defeated, those of us who are alive will receive blood crystals in addition to monetary rewards. I think the Taoist master has a high cultivation base, so he should have heard of blood crystals, right? Of course I've heard of it. Qin Daoxian smiled slightly. He was finally sure. What kind of monster slaying event is this? This is simply a breeding farm. Every country here, every city is a large and small farm. The monster slaying event held every once in a while is when the world monsters come to harvest. Moreover, after the world monsters were harvested, they did not forget to feed the blood crystals. It's really, raise the human race as beasts. Qin Daoxian clenched his fists tightly. Although the human race in the real demon world seems to live very peacefully, this calm is all an illusion created by the demon world for the human race. Compared with swallowing ordinary humans, the inner world will be strengthened. The improvement brought by swallowing the powerhouse is obviously greater. As long as the powerhouse they swallow is not beyond their control, there will be no problem. Say it again. This is the real demon world, and all kinds of big demons and demon masters are emerging one after another. Even if a certain place gets out of the way and there is an unexpectedly strong person, it will soon be wiped out by the big demon or demon master who came here. No strong person can become stronger overnight. The strong become stronger, there are traces to follow. Besides, if you want to become stronger in physical cultivation, you need more resources than a chi cultivator. As long as the monsters control these resources, they can control the speed at which the strong human race becomes stronger, and finally achieve a perfect harvest. Qin Daoxian raised his head and looked at the bright sunshine, but he always felt that there was a layer of dark clouds covering him. Coming? In the crowd. I do not know who shouted such a sentence. Immediately, the crowds on both sides of the strait seemed to be boiling with a ladle of water poured into the hot oil pan. In the middle of Jianghu River, a vortex gradually formed. The whirlpool grew from small to large, and finally, a catfish-shaped monster rushed out of the water. From the outside, the world monsters are very similar to the monsters in the Xiuxian world. Naos demeanor, cruel and cunning eyes, revealing the exact same appearance as the Wanxing sea monster beast everywhere. On the altar. When the sword saint of Qingzhou saw the world demon, he rushed forward and stepped on the river surface, blasting the water into waves dozens of meters high. Kill. Boom. The crowd was ignited by the actions of the Qingzhou juggernaut. Everyone held weapons and rushed towards the catfish world demon, including the other two flesh derivative realm Lianhua Palace Master and Yenshin Taoist. Have to say, compared with the Qi cultivator, the attack of the body repair is single, or in other words, the attack of the body repair in the real demon world is single. It seems that they have no means other than hand-to-hand combat. It's just, the consequences of melee combat with the world demon are very cruel. I see. In the middle of Jianghu River, a trace of mockery flashed in the scarlet eyes of the catfish world monster, and it suddenly opened a mouth. Inside the mouth of the blood is a pitch-black black hole. This black hole is exactly the same as the otherworld passage that Qin Daoxian saw. Everyone who rushed towards the catfish world monster only felt an irresistible force of swallowing coming towards them. The closer you get to the black hole, the greater the force of this swallowing. To the end. Everyone could not stabilize their bodies as if a dragon sucked water. They flew towards the big mouth of the world demon. Qin Daoxian was hidden in the crowd, but he was not influenced by this swallowing force. After all, although the world monster in front of him is powerful, its cultivation base is equivalent to the level of foundation building, and it does not pose any threat to him. However, there is no threat to him. It does not mean that there is no threat to the people who came to slay the demon. I saw that everyone was quickly swallowed by the catfish world demon and disappeared. Blink of an eye. The number of people on both sides of the river who came to slay the demons decreased by as much as 20% to 30%. Only the three masters of the flesh-derived realm were struggling to support them there. Fellow Taoist Shenyan, you and I will attack this beast's eyes together. Palace Master Xiao, take the opportunity to attack his jaw and we will attack together. Okay. The Palace Master of Linghua Palace and the Taoist Yenshin nodded and agreed. Next moment. The three people who have reached an agreement are no longer stable, and they are allowed to be swallowed by the world monster. In a blink, the three rushed to its mouth through the devouring of the world demon. Compared with the huge stature of the catfish world demon, the three of them are like flies. The sword saint of Qingzhou, who is close to the catfish world demon, is not even as big as the other's eyes. But next second, a picture that surprised Qin Daoxian appeared. I saw that the three people grew bigger together, and even the smallest Linghua Palace's body suddenly became dozens of times larger, reaching more than 10 feet. The one with the most exaggerated figure changes is the sword saint of Qingzhou. Its body is more than 30 feet tall, almost comparable to the giant mouth opened by the catfish world monster. Quick. Qingzhou Juggernaut didn't know where he threw the sword in his hand for a long time, only to see that he held the upper jaw of the catfish world monster with one hand and the lower jaw with the other, and actually supported the mouth of the catfish world monster. When the palace master of Linghua Palace and Taoist Shenyan saw this, they did not care to blame the sword saint of Qingzhou for not following the negotiation. The two did not dare to neglect, and tacitly attacked the eyes of the catfish world demon. Who knows that this behavior of the two people completely angered the catfish world demon. It shook its head sharply and an unparalleled force attacked, directly throwing the Qingzhou swordsman out. Immediately after, it bites at Yenshin Taoist. Save. Before the words were finished, the Taoist Yenshin was directly cut into two by its mouth. Qin Daoxian even saw that on the broken body of Yenshin Taoist, granulation buds grew wildly, trying to connect the broken bodies together. But the catfish world demon didn't give him this chance and swallowed the opponent directly. The palace master of Linghua Palace was frightened by the scene in front of him, and he didn't care to escape for his life. But how can the catfish demon be willing to let her go? I saw it opened its mouth again, and a suction force that was even larger than before hit. Linghua Palace's main body, only 10 feet tall, could not resist this swallowing force, and was soon swallowed by the catfish world monster. He ate 30% of ordinary body training in a row, and then ate 2 masters from the flesh-derived realm. The catfish world demon seemed to be full, glanced at the Qingzhou swordsman who was thrown away by him, turned over and jumped, and disappeared into the Qinyang River. After a stick of incense, the entire Qinyang River. Apart from the bloodstains left by Taoist Yenshin, it was impossible to see that a war had just broken out here. When? Haha, we won. The demon has been repelled. Although there were constant cheering shouts, everyone with discernment knew how they repelled the demons. On the altar, the patrol officer in the black official robe gave an order to the subordinate beside him. So, a small official came to distribute the rewards of the demon slayer. Qin Daoxian, who had been hiding in the crowd, also received this reward. A blood-red crystal. Qin Daoxian carefully looked at the blood crystal, and then took it into his arms. A slaying demon event has come to an end. Not surprisingly, Yang City will usher in another 10 years of peaceful days. When the next batch of physical cultivation grows up, the next monster-slaying event will be held and so on. Qin Daoxian glanced at the sword saint of Qingzhou, who was thrown away by the catfish world demon, and the officials of the inspection department who were standing not far from him, silent. As night falls, both sides of the Qinyang River became inaccessible again. A white figure appeared beside the river bank. It was Qin Daoxian. It is different from physical cultivation that is only physically strong. As a foundation-building cultivator, Qin Daoxian was not only powerful in his true essence, but his divine sense was even more terrifying. Especially after he opened up the Sea of Divine Light, he even mastered a spell to attack the Sea of Consciousness. compared with the Zhangzhou corpse-tied battle. Now Chen Daoxian, not only the group attack is terrifying, but the single attack has also become more sharp. After all, the magical power of Ding Soul Divine Light is a stunt of the one-on-one fighting method. Early in the day, Chen Daoxian knew that the Catfish World Demon did not leave after swallowing the people who came to kill the demon, but dived into the bottom of the river to refine it silently. Come again by night. Chen Daoxian found that the other party had not left yet. Humph. The consciousness was withdrawn from the bottom of the river, and a coldness flashed on Chen Daoxian's face. Although he did not have any communication with the human race in this world, Chen Daoxian had an indescribable anger in his heart when he saw that they were both human races being kept in such captivity. He knew that this anger probably came from the dignity of the human race. A magic Dao pattern circulates and the water escape technique is used. Next moment, Chen Daoxian's figure disappeared into the river. Not long after Chen Daoxian disappeared, another figure appeared immediately. It was the master of the flesh derivative realm who came to slay the demon during the day, the Sword Saint of Qingzhou. Less than half a cup of tea. Chen Daoxian dived into the bottom of the riverbed. Into the eye. A huge catfish with its eyes closed, lay down on the riverbed, sleeping comfortably. This Catfish World Demon did not notice the danger at all. Chapter 225. Look at this behemoth in front of you. A trace of indifference flashed in Chen Daoxian's eyes. I see. A beam of light went straight to the Catfish World monster, and suddenly the Catfish World monster who was still in Qingyang River during the day was showing great power, and the whole body of the Catfish World monster who wanted to slaughter froze. Immediately, a little star pierced the undercurrent at the bottom of the river. The star ray followed the head of the Catfish World demon and cut it in two. With the breath-holding technique and the soul-fixing light, Chen Daoxian directly killed a world monster equivalent to the human race's foundation-building stage. To know. According to Luo Ziyuan's description, the strength of the same-level demons is completely inferior to the elite monks of the human race in the Xiuxian world. However, Chen Daoxian easily killed him. It can be seen that Chen Daoxian's current strength has far exceeded that of the elite monks of the same level. This is still the strength of his Kendo realm that has not completely entered the third level of sword intent. Once he enters the third level of sword intent, his strength will also usher in an increase. However, even with Chen Daoxian's comprehension, it is somewhat difficult to enter the third level of sword intent at the foundation establishment. Kill the monster with one blow. Chen Daoxian didn't dare to delay, his consciousness swept away, and he soon found a fist-sized bead in the abdominal cavity of the catfish demon. Look carefully. Inside this bead there is actually a side of the cave world. But soon the cave world inside the beads collapsed and turned into a gray one. Before he could think about it, Chen Daoxian put the Jieyuanzhu after the collapse of the cave into his high-end storage bag, took out a cyan spiritual flag and waved it casually. Brush. After a wave of space fluctuations, Chen Daoxian's figure instantly disappeared in place. Less than a cup of tea. A figure wearing a black robe appeared above the Qingyang River. The black figure stood in the air, his eyes seemed to penetrate the bottom of the Qingyang River, and he saw the corpse of the Catfish World monster lying on the riverbed and divided into two. He frowned and said, "Is there another body repair that breaks the realm derived from flesh and blood?" Next second, the black figure disappeared in place. The other side. Chen Daoxian attacked and killed the catfish demon, and brought the blood crystals and Jiyuan beads that he obtained, and came to the entrance tens of thousands of miles away in an instant. Quickly flew into the cave covered by the formation. Chen Daoxian stepped into the otherworld passage and returned to Wuxia. Southwest waters of Wuxia. The otherworld passage in the depths of the Demon Mountain Mountains. This place has long been listed as the top secret within the clan by the mercenary. Except for Luo Shiyuan, Luo Li and other senior mercenaries, the ordinary people of the Merman do not know the existence of this channel at all. In the dark passage, a white figure stepped out instantly who was not Chen Daoxian. Seeing Chen Daoxian, Luo Li, who was originally worried, suddenly showed a look of joy, and hurried forward to support Chen Daoxian's dizzy figure after crossing the border. "Are you okay?" After a few breaths, Chen Daoxian stood firm, looked at Luo Li who was supporting him with a worried expression, shook his head and said, "I'm fine." "You'll be fine." Realizing that it was inappropriate to pull in public, Luo Li calmly loosened Chen Daoxian's clothes. Chen Daoxian's mind was completely off Luo Li at the moment. He looked at Luo Shiyuan with a serious face and said, "Patriarch Luo, immediately block the news of the true demon realm passage, and list this place as a forbidden place. No one is allowed to approach without my order. Yes, my lord. Luo Shuyuan responded immediately. In fact, he strictly blocked the news as early as the beginning of the discovery of the real Demon World channel. It's just not listed here as a forbidden place. It is now listed as a forbidden place, but it only raises the level of secrecy by another level. Luo Li on the side saw Qin Daoxuan's serious expression, and asked curiously, "What did you find on the opposite side?" Heard. Qin Daoxian frowned and said, "The situation on the other side is a bit complicated, and I don't know much about it now, but I have gained a little in the real demon world." Say it. In front of Luo Shuyuan and Luo Li, he took out the blood crystal and Jieyuanzhu. Jiuanzhu. Who knows that Luo Shuyuan saw the gray bead in Qin Daoxuan's hand and immediately recognized it. Oh, Patriarch Luo also knows this thing? Slightly heard. Luo Shuyuan nodded. It is rumored that the big clan sect will use this thing to open up the heavenly paradise. Lord, let's see, the gray part of this bead is the chaotic energy formed after the world collapsed in the demon's body. Injecting this chaotic energy into the blessed land of the cave can expand the space of the blessed land of the cave. Hear this. Qin Daoxian couldn't help thinking of the innumerable cave worlds of Qianyuan Jianzong, and he said in his heart, "Is the qi of chaos only used to open up caves?" This, subordinates are not clear. Luo Shuyuan shook his head slightly embarrassed. No problem. Qin Daoxian nodded, and immediately put the Jieyuanzhu into the storage bag. He just heard the chaos qi just now and he felt something in his heart. Well known. When heaven and earth were not divided, it was called the Hongmeng period, and its state was a mass of chaos. It seems. It is reasonable to say that the world demon's internal world collapsed and returned to chaos. Chaos. Hongmeng. Could this chaotic energy be related to using the golden scriptures in the Sea of Knowledge? Qin Daoxian looked at the imposing golden scriptures in the Sea of Knowledge and thought to himself, "Lord." Seeing that Qin Daoxian was in deep thought, Luo Shuyuan on the side made a test. "Fine." Qin Daoxian raised his head. "Patriarch Luo, look at this thing again." With that said, Qin Daoxian handed over the blood crystal in his hand. Luo Shuyuan took the blood crystal handed over by Qin Daoxian, and after careful observation he shook his head and said, "Your Majesty, this subordinate has never seen this thing, but I seem to feel it coming from my body. Instinct desire. Come to think of it, this should be some kind of body-refining treasure." Heard. Qin Daoxian nodded. He feels the same as Luo Shuyuan and instinctively desires it. Of course, it is impossible for Qin Daoxian to take it rashly without knowing what this blood crystal is. "Qin Daoxian, are you going back?" "Not going back for now." Qin Daoxian turned to look at Luo Li, shook his head and said solemnly, "The real demon world has a lot to do with it. Before I thoroughly investigate it, I will retreat here." Speaking of which, Qin Daoxian laughed. "Fortunately, there is a spiritual eye here, but you mere people won't think that I use your spiritual veins?" Hearing Qin Daoxuan's joking words, Luo Shuyuan smiled and said, "Of course I don't mind, my little girl, and I wish you lived here forever." Who knows that Luo Li blushed when she heard this and said, "Father, who wants him to live here all the time?" Say it. The figure flashed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Seeing Luo Li's shy appearance, Qin Daoxian couldn't help feeling a little embarrassed. "By the way, Patriarch Luo, I believe that Fairy Luo's cultivation base has been promoted to the foundation of completion, and I don't know when I plan to open up the Purple Mansion?" Talking about his beloved daughter's cultivation, the smile on Luo Ziyuan's face slowly faded, his brows furrowed and said, "It is no trivial matter to break through the Purple Mansion from the foundation establishment. The little girl has only been practicing for 50 years, so let's take a break and polish it a little more. It's not too late to break through again." Sanding? Qin Daoxian frowned as he looked in the direction where Luo Li left. Logically speaking, after a cultivator's cultivation has reached consummation, there is no need for polishing. The so-called continued polishing is just a waste of time. The only possibility is that the mere people lack the resources to break through the Zifu. Just like the monks build the foundation, the monks break through to the Purple Mansion, and the resources they need are more cherished. Not to mention the most precious one among the elixir that helped to open up the Purple Mansion. The other lesser treasures that helped to open up the Purple Mansion, the mere people were unable to come up with them. Zifu Dan is different from Zhuji Dan. Even the big family in Sangzhou is extremely difficult to obtain. Every time a Zifudan appeared in Sangzhou, it was bound to be scrambled by many big families. If it is said that the Foundation Establishment pill can be easily purchased with only tens of thousands to less than 100,000 spirit stones, even if the Zifu pill costs millions of spirit stones, it may not be able to buy it. In fact, the more the monks cultivated to the later stage, the more expensive the spiritual stones needed to purchase resources. Some even cherish rare high-level treasures, and can only use barter instead of accepting spiritual stone transactions. Because for those Jindan Jinren and Yuanying Jinjuan, high-level treasures are too rare, and no matter how many spirit stones there are, other than increasing the number of spiritual veins of the faction and enhancing the background of the faction, it is of no use to them. As a result, these high-level monks are naturally reluctant to trade with spirit stones. Guess the embarrassment of the Mare people. Qin Daoxian no longer asked. After all, he didn't have Zifu pill in his hand for the time being, and if he kept asking questions, it would be useless except to add embarrassment. After half a cup of tea, watch Luo Xiu go away. Qin Daoxian began to open up a cave in the spiritual eye not far from the real demon world passage. Although he did not open up caves many times, but with the help of his powerful consciousness and cultivation, just a stick of incense time, a simple cave house was completed by him. In the cave there are everything in the main hall, bedroom and practice room for practicing and retreating. Although rudimentary, it is enough for him to use. What's more, the practice room opened up by Qin Daoxian is still in the open air. That is to say, as long as he looks up, he can see the bright starry sky of Wanxinghai, especially the 7 stars shining like the rising sun in the starry sky. The reason why Qin Daoxian paid so much attention to the Xinghai layer of Wanxinghai. Naturally, it was because he saw the formation of Wanxinghai from the remaining memory fragments of the immortal. Therefore, he had a slight expectation in his heart for this mysterious and unpredictable star sea layer. Perhaps, after seeing the scene in the memory fragment, anyone will have expectations for this star sea layer. Only, the Xinghai layer of Wanxinghai is here. In the entire Wanxinghai and even the entire Xiuxian world, any foundation building cultivator who knows the art of water escape can come here to find out. In other words, it is open to almost all monks above the foundation period. As for whether these monks can gain something from it, it depends on personal luck and understanding. Qin Daoxian can't guarantee this thing. After all, he has never encountered any chance except for the golden scriptures in the sea. Almost all the gains were earned by himself. Only Wanxinghai could be regarded as the first chance he had ever encountered. And it's a great opportunity. However, although this opportunity is great, it is obviously not so easy to succeed. Otherwise, the Xinghai layer of Wanxinghai has been standing in the underwater world for countless years, and no one will have this opportunity. Wrong. Qin Daoxian suddenly reacted. Perhaps. It's not that no one has ever obtained this kind of opportunity, but that those who have obtained this kind of opportunity keep a close eye on it and leave no words at all so that future generations do not understand. Or maybe Qin Daoxian's level is too low, and this kind of secret is only circulated in the circle of high-level monks, and he doesn't know it. Either way. Anyway, even if some people know about this kind of opportunity, there are definitely not many. In the practice room, Qin Daoxian sat cross-legged on the Wenyu futon. He raised his head and looked at the star sea layer above his head. Next moment, he smashed together 30 stardust in the sea of knowledge and fused them into one. Immediately after, a familiar epiphany struck. Under the epiphany, he stared at the brightest rising sun above his head, and countless insights came to his mind. Vaguely, he seemed to be able to see a palace above the rising sun. Qin Daoxian's consciousness was constantly rising, and he was getting closer and closer to the palace on the rising sun. But still he couldn't fly to this palace. In other words, it's not that Qin Daoxian can't fly to the palace on the rising sun, but that he hasn't waited for him to fly to the palace. Epiphany time is over. After a stick of incense, Qin Daoxian, who had finished his epiphany, sat blankly on the Wenyu futon. This is the end? He murmured, I've stored my comprehension for a month, just use it to fly? Qin Daoxian couldn't help but feel a sense of absurdity in his heart. He once again felt the suffocation of the lack of time for epiphany. And unlike before, this time he wanted to fly to the palace in the rising sun in a state of epiphany. And this ascension is obviously unstoppable. Otherwise, the next time you come back, you will definitely have to fly again. But he only had a stick of incense for his epiphany. Even if Qin Daoxian flew many times, he would not be able to fly to the palace in the rising sun. Unless he took out the Jiyuan orb from the storage bag again. One is the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, and the other is the Chi of Chaos. Are the two of you related? A faint expectation flashed in Qin Daoxian's heart. No matter how small the world inside the world demon is, after the world is shattered, it will essentially return to chaos. That is to say, the chaotic energy in this Jiuan orb is, in theory, not much different from the chaotic energy that is not time-sharing between heaven and earth. The only difference is the chaotic aura of the timeless heaven and earth, both in quality and quantity, far exceeds the chaotic energy in the Jianghu. After all, it was the existence that opened up the world. I know the golden scriptures in the sea. Do I need the chi of chaos? All along, Qin Daoxian has not given up exploring the golden scriptures in the sea of knowledge. But this golden scripture seems to be immune to all things visible and invisible. Whether it is Qin Daoxian's divine consciousness, true essence, or even the stardust of comprehension he has stored, it cannot affect the golden scriptures in the slightest. The state of the golden scriptures in the sea of consciousness has hardly changed since Qin Daoxian first discovered it. The only one change. It still devoured the soul-defying divine light released by Shinjua Jinren and saved Qin Daoxian's life. Afterwards, he directly analyzed the complete magical power of Soul Ding divine light. That is to say, the golden scriptures have the function of analyzing exercises or supernatural powers. However, Qin Daoxian did not dare to try this function after he tried it for a while. Because the low-level magic golden scriptures simply ignore it. As for high-level spells, he is afraid of death. Chapter 226. Wangxinghai Underwater World. Demon Mountain. Qin Daoxian withdrew from the epiphany state, frowning. Think for a moment. He took out the gray Jiayuanzhu from the storage bag again. The chi of chaos, whether it's useful or not, it's up to you. With a fluke in his heart, Qin Daoxian used his true yuan to break the Jiayuanzhu. Immediately, a wisp of gray aura emerged from the Jiayuanzhu. At the moment when the chi of chaos appeared, the golden scriptures in Qin Daoxian's consciousness sea really changed a little. The center of the sea of knowledge. The golden scriptures trembled slightly as if they were not satisfied with the quality of the chaos chi, but they still slowly absorbed the gray aura with reluctance. Sure enough, an ecstasy surged in Qin Daoxian's heart. In the sea of knowledge, the chaotic energy was absorbed by the golden scriptures the moment it came into contact with the golden scriptures. Soon, the chaos chi in the Jiuan pearl was completely absorbed by the golden scriptures. Qin Daoxian had a hunch that the change was not over yet. Sure enough, in the next second, a large amount of stardust appeared on the golden scriptures, and then these stardust floated to Qin Daoxian's sea of consciousness space, revolving around the golden scriptures. 1, 2. Qin Daoxian counted it carefully, and the golden scriptures fed back a total of 763 star dusts, which was equivalent to the comprehension Qin Daoxian had stored for more than 2 years. This? Looking at the dazzling and flying stardust in the sea of consciousness, Qin Daoxian was overwhelmed by a huge sense of happiness. All the time. If Qin Daoxian wanted to obtain the star dust of understanding, he could only recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment classic every day, accumulating over time. Now, he finally found a way to get a lot of stardust, how to keep him from getting excited. 763 star dusts were enough for him to have an epiphany for more than 6 hours. On weekdays. Although Qin Daoxian can have an epiphany every 30 days, the time for each epiphany is too short, only a stick of incense time, which cannot satisfy Qin Daoxian's increasingly advanced kendo realm and refining level. Now he finally found a way to quickly accumulate stardust. Kill the monsters. At this moment, in Qin Daoxian's eyes, the cruel world monsters became baby bumps. Compared with the monsters that can only kill meat, the Jiayuanzhu of the world monster has a much greater effect on Qin Daoxian. It's really a treasure. Qin Daoxian looked at the location of the true demon realm passage and said with joy. Resisting the urge to return to the real demon world to slaughter again, Qin Daoxian raised his head again and looked at the starry sky above his head. Next second, 30 stardust in the sea of knowledge merged into one. The familiar sense of epiphany struck again, and with the sudden improvement of comprehension, Qin Daoxian's consciousness once again soared towards the rising sun, above his head. Same as last time. As he flew close to the rising sun, the epiphany time came. Qin Daoxian did not dare to delay, and 30 stardust merged into one. Next moment. The epiphany state continues again. The familiar sense of soaring continued. Very good. Qin Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged on the Wenyu futon, showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. A total of 4 times the stardust was fused, and the epiphany state lasted for an hour. Qin Daoxian finally realized that he flew above the rising sun, and saw the palace on the rising sun. Standing in front of the palace on the rising sun, Qin Daoxian looked at the scene in front of him and was at a loss. A white-robed Taoist appeared in front of him. The Taoist man in white looked indifferent and said in a cold tone, "The 19,769 testers, please understand this sword art within an hour." Say. A sword art appeared in front of Qin Daoxian. This is. Qin Daoxian took a closer look and saw that it was a sword technique called Instant Shadow. Space Sword Art. Qin Daoxian is no longer a rookie when he first came into contact with wind-chasing sword art. His current kendo realm has already touched the realm of the third level of sword intent. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is a kendo genius. He could naturally recognize the type of sword art in front of him at a glance. When Qin Daoxian practiced sword art, he suffered from no choice. At that time, the Qin family only had two first-order swordsmanships, wind-chasing sword art, and covering rain sword art. Otherwise, Qin Daoxian would not necessarily understand the Siyu sword intent. With his comprehension, he may have comprehended other sword intents, such as the five-element sword intent and the space-time sword intent. The reason why the big sect is more powerful than the Xiuxin family, in addition to the talent of the disciples, is that the big sect often has a complete inheritance. The general family monks do not have this advantage. For example, before Qin Daoxian obtained the Qinyuan sword classic, he didn't even know that there were different types of sword intent. Even his common sense about kendo was learned from Zhou Mubai's kendo jade slips. It can be said, Qin Daoxian's kendo can reach the current state, completely relying on his own step-by-step to find out, without anyone's guidance and help. Sect disciples are completely different. Once identified by Qinyuan Jianzong as an amazing kendo talent, he was selected as a direct disciple. There will be a complete training system to help the disciple choose the direction of comprehending sword intent. Although Qinyuan Jianzong can't control what kind of sword intent the disciple finally comprehends, it can work hard in this direction. For example, a direct disciple with excellent kendo talent wants to understand the sword intent of the earth element and the sword intent of the five elements. Qinyuan Jianzong will find various earth attribute sword tactics for him, let him practice and comprehend, and help him comprehend the earth-moving sword intent. Thus, even if the disciple finally only comprehends the branch sword meaning in the earth element sword meaning, he will never comprehend the other sword meaning in the five elements sword meaning. Not only that, Qinyuan Jianzong also has a lot of experience and insights from predecessors, which can guide disciples how to comprehend the complete five-element sword intent. Even in order for his disciples to comprehend the complete earth-based sword intent, the various earth attribute sword tactics given by Qinyuan Jianzong are the most complete. Once all of them are cultivated to the perfect state, it is very likely that the disciple will directly comprehend the sword intent of tuxing, rather than its branch sword intent. Don't underestimate this step ahead. Maybe when the cultivation base is low, the difference between comprehending the five-element sword intent and the branching sword intent cannot be seen. But when the cultivator's cultivation reaches Jindan and even nascent soul, the difference between different sword intents began to appear. Many branches of sword intent can only cultivate to the realm of the third Apei at most, and not many can cultivate to the realm of the fourth Apei, let alone the realm of the fifth Apei. The complete five-element sword intent does not have such troubles. Not only can it be cultivated all the way to the realm of the sword domain, but also the realm of the sixth law. As long as the cultivator can comprehend it himself, it can also be achieved without hindrance. Unlike the cultivator who has embarked on the branch of sword intent, he can only look at the cut-off road ahead and feel sad. Of course, the cultivator embarked on the road of branching sword intent, which does not mean that it is a dead end. For example, Qin Daoxian comprehends the Siyu sword intent. He can completely comprehend several branch sword intent, integrate them, and then comprehend the complete water-traveling sword intent. It's just that compared with the sword cultivator who has understood the complete water movement sword intent at the beginning of his practice, he undoubtedly has to take a lot of detours. But this is also impossible. Whoever made Qin Daoxian have no inheritance and no teaching, can get to where he is today. The effect of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic is already against the sky. The current Qin Daoxian, in addition to comprehending the complete Shui Xingjian accident, there is a second way, which is to comprehend other kinds of sword intent. Only taking the second kendo means that Qin Daoxian will be distracted from his care and will have no time to take care of Siyu Jiani. You must know that his Siyu sword intent is only one step away from the realm of the third layer of stars. After walking so far on this kendo, no one is willing to give up. Although Qin Daoxian had the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, he still couldn't make up his mind. In front of the palace, Qin Daoxian quickly finished reading this sword technique called Shining Shadow. Although this sword art is a space-class sword art, it is only a first-order sword art. From Qin Daoxian's point of view, it is not difficult to fully comprehend it. But to cultivate it to the perfect state within an hour, it is not something that ordinary monks can do. Even if Zhou Mubai was here, it would be difficult for him to do it. His expression was condensed. Qin Daoxian didn't dare to neglect, and quickly browsed through this instant shadow sword art. In an epiphany state, the various subtleties of this sword art were constantly comprehended by him. Qin Daoxian's mastery of the instant shadow sword art is also rising. Beginning, small success, great success until the final consummation. Just a stick of incense. Qin Daoxian actually practiced instant shadow to a perfect state, which was much faster than when he practiced wind-chasing sword art for the first time. He knew that this was due to the enhancement of his own comprehension, and the bigger reason was the effect of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, breaking through to the second level. All right. A stick of incense completely mastered the instant shadow sword art. Qin Daoxian raised his head and looked at the indifferent Taoist in white. Play it once. Yes. Qin Daoxian bowed his hands and immediately transformed into a flying sword, and displayed the fully comprehended, instant shadow sword art in front of him. Watching the flying sword in front of him disappear and appear like a teleportation, the white-robed Taoist continued indifferently, "Please understand this sword art within an hour." Next moment, another new sword technique appeared in front of Qin Daoxian. He took a closer look and saw that it was a first-order space sword art. At this moment, Qin Daoxian could probably see that the Taoist man in white, or the person who left the inheritance, was teaching and choosing the right air in this way. In an hour, he completely comprehended a first-order sword art. This in itself is a very high threshold. Even a kendo genius like Zhou Mubai probably couldn't do it. Not to mention the constant comprehension of new sword art like now. If it wasn't for Qin Daoxian's Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, he would have given up long ago. This is simply not something ordinary geniuses can do. Although the sword art this time is the same as the first rank, it is obviously a little more difficult than the previous instant shadow sword art. But with the blessing of 30 times his understanding, Qin Daoxian completely grasped it within a stick of incense. Really? Immediately afterwards, it was the third sword art. See this scene. Qin Daoxian was no longer nervous. No matter what the result is, being able to learn the space-based sword art that is rarely seen here is something you can't ask for. He still has nearly 5 hours to maintain his epiphany, so there is absolutely no need to worry. So, the third sword technique was also mastered by him. Next, Qin Daoxian mastered one first-order sword art after another. Without exception, these swordsmanships are all first-order spatial swordsmanships, and as Qin Daoxian continued to practice, he found that these spatial swordsmanships had a faint connection. Until the 9th first-order space-class sword art was mastered by Qin Daoxian. The Taoist man in white finally stopped. The 19,769th testers, you have a new opportunity to test, please choose to continue or give up. When Qin Daoxian heard this, he glanced at the hundreds of stardust in the sea and nodded, "Continue. Please master this sword art within half an hour." Say it. In front of Qin Daoxian, a space-class sword art appeared again. Sure enough, the difficulty of the sword art has deepened. Moreover, the time given by the white-clothed Taoist was shortened by half to half an hour. Of course, whether it was an hour or half an hour, it made no difference to Qin Daoxian at all. Anyway, it only takes a little more time for him to cultivate a sword art to the perfect state. But this time, Qin Daoxian encountered a little trouble. Due to the sudden increase in the difficulty of the sword art, Qin Daoxian was a little uncomfortable, so that the time to fully master this sword art was increased to 1.5 incense. 1.5 incense sticks, half an hour away, only half a stick of incense. In other words, the effect that he can achieve by 30 times his comprehension is not far from the difficulty given by the Taoist in white. This discovery made Qin Daoxian completely put away the contempt in his heart. The comprehension requirements for the testers are so high, obviously this inheritance is not simple. According to Taoist White Clothes, he is more than 19,000 testers who participated in this inheritance trial. That is to say, the more than 19,000 testers in front of him have not obtained this inheritance. Obviously, the difficulty of obtaining this inheritance is probably still higher than he expected. If in the past, Qin Daoxian really had no confidence, After all, judging from the effect of storing the Epiphany once a month in the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, it is impossible to obtain this inheritance. Even if the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic breaks through to the third floor, it still hangs. But with the Jieyuanzhu of the Jieyao, everything becomes different. The Golden Scriptures seem to be very fond of Chaos Chi, and after absorbing it, it will feed back to Qin Daoxuan's comprehension stardust. With these comprehension stardust, Qin Daoxian does not have to accumulate stardust every day in exchange for a stick of incense once every 30 days for Epiphany time. Since then, as long as there is enough Chaos Chi, Qin Daoxian can always maintain 30 or more times his understanding. From the short-lived genius of a stick of incense to the lasting genius. Inside the palace. As the trial progressed, the stardust in Qin Daoxuan's sea of knowledge was continuously consumed. In the end, more than 700 star dusts were all consumed, leaving only less than 30 star dust scattered in the sea of consciousness, spinning around the Golden Scriptures alone. Run out of stardust. Qin Daoxian felt the Epiphany gradually disappearing and finally woke up. Fortunately, all the 36 first-order spatial sword arts were cultivated to the perfect state by him. The 19,769th tester, you have 2 trials, please choose to continue or give up. Continue? Qin Daoxian said solemnly. Although there is no blessing of 30 times the comprehension, Qin Daoxian wants to try it once with his true comprehension. How difficult is this inheritance trial? Chapter 227. Please master this sword art within an hour. The voice of the Taoist man in white was still indifferent, without the slightest emotion. In front of Qin Daoxian. Soon a new sword technique appeared. Compared with the 36 first-order space swordsmanships in front of him, the new swordsmanship in front of him is obviously more mysterious and obscure. Second-order space sword tactics. Qin Daoxian immediately judged the rank of this sword art. Among the many sword intents, the space-time sword intent is inherently more difficult than the 5-element sword intent, and the power of the space-time sword intent at the same level is also stronger than the 5-element sword intent. In the same way, the difficulty of the time-space swordsmanship is also greater than that of the 5-element swordsmanship. Therefore, although the sword art in front of Qin Daoxian was a second-order sword art, its difficulty was no lower than that of a third-order 5-element sword art. This level of swordsmanship. It is already equivalent to the third-order spell difficulty that Zifu monks usually practice. Master it in an hour? Qin Daoxian read it like swallowing dates and forcibly remembered it. But I still feel dizzy, and I don't have the constant comprehension that I had before with 30 times of comprehension. He stood in front of the Taoist man in white, his brows furrowed, and he said nothing. Soon an hour passed. The time has come. If you fail to master this sword art within an hour, please choose to consume 1 trial opportunity to continue or quit. The expression of the white-robed Taoist did not change in the slightest, and he said coldly, Qin Daoxian frowned and said, if I quit, how can I come back here next time? For Qin Daoxuan's question. As if the Taoist in white didn't hear it, he still replied mechanically, please choose to consume 1 trial opportunity to continue or quit. See. Qin Daoxian bowed his hands helplessly, I choose to quit. The words fall. The Taoist man in white stretched out his finger, pointed at the center of Qin Daoxuan's eyebrows. Qin Daoxian instinctively wanted to dodge, but realized that he was in a state of consciousness at the moment, and there was a golden scripture sitting in the sea of knowledge, so he simply did not dodge. A spot of light rushed into Qin Daoxuan's eyebrows. Immediately, he felt that his figure kept falling until he returned to the sea of consciousness. Magic Ape Mountain Cave House. In the practice room. Qin Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged on the Wenyu futon, suddenly opened his eyes. The first time he was conscious, he touched his forehead. This is... I saw a divine rune mark appearing between his eyebrows. Qin Daoxian swept his consciousness, and he found that this divine rune mark was exactly the same as the divine rune mark between Yu Wudeo's eyebrows. It turns out that Wan Xinghai's trial inheritance has long been mastered by Qinyuan sword sect. Qin Daoxian sighed. But then it felt very normal. In the Qinyuan sword sect of Nuoda, there are always talented and evil people who discover the secrets of the sea layer of Wanxinghaixing. As the actual ruler of Wanxinghai Qinyuan sword sect, if he does not know the inheritance of this trial, it is impossible to say. Only. Qin Daoxuan's thoughts moved, and the imprint of the divine pattern on the eyebrows disappeared automatically. The The center of his brows returned to their original appearance. Seeing his appearance, Qin Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. In his opinion, wearing this divine mark on his forehead has no meaning other than ostentation and showing off. After all, this is just a thing that shows the identity of the tester, and its main function is to make the tester consciously enter the test ground again. Such as Qin Daoxian. There are now 2 more chances to enter the land of trials. Qin Daoxian did not know how Yi Wudao's status as a tester was obtained, but it must have come by coincidence just like him. After all, in the world of immortals, there are also treasures that increase comprehension in a short period of time, such as rare treasures such as Enlightenment tea. It's just that increasing comprehension in a short period of time is of little significance to the tester. Because even with a short-term increase in comprehension, he barely passed the trial level and entered the trial palace. But the next trial is the most challenging one. Such as Qin Daoxian. Under the blessing of 30 times the comprehension, the whole way was like a broken bamboo, and the 13 and 16 first-order space sword tactics were continuously cultivated to the perfect state. But after losing the blessing of the epiphany state, he was instantly beaten back to his original shape. Not to mention mastering the second-order space-like sword art given by the white-clothed Taoist within an hour. In an hour he can't even get started. You know, Qin Daoxian's kendo talent is not bad, it can even be said to be very strong. It can be seen from this. How perverted the requirements of this trial inheritance are. To pass the inheritance trial by relying on the treasure of Enlightenment tea, which can increase understanding in a short period of time, is simply a fool's dream. Qin Daoxian has a hunch that now, as long as he is willing, he can master a branch of space-type sword intent at any time. This is where the deep horror accumulates. Before he understood the Siyu sword intent, he had only mastered a first-order water-moving sword art, and he had to rely on the skill of blending the Tao with the sword and comprehend the sword intent in a clever way. But now, having mastered the 36 first-order spatial sword techniques, he does not use this trick at all. But even if I have the blessing of 30 times my comprehension, it is not an easy task to master the second-order space sword art in 1 hour. Qin Daoxian said silently, "What's more, this is just the beginning. Judging from the rules of the previous interview, it will become more and more difficult in the future. The tester will definitely be required to master a more difficult second-order space sword art in half an hour or even less." Qin Daoxian frowned and analyzed secretly. Unless. He raised his head, unless I can comprehend the spatial sword intent. After a sword cultivator understands a certain sword intent, the difficulty of cultivating the corresponding sword art will be greatly reduced. For example, Qin Daoxian comprehends the Siyu sword intent, and then when he cultivates the water-traveling sword art, the difficulty will be lower than before. The higher the level of his silk rain sword intent, the more obvious the increase in comprehension of this corresponding attribute. Given that Qin Daoxian is only 1 step away from the Siyu sword intent triple star transformation realm, he can master a first-order water attribute sword art in a few days at most. Compared with the past that could not master a first-order water attribute sword art for several years or even decades, it was a world of difference. Because unlike spiritual root, comprehension is something that can be continuously improved with the improvement of cultivator's cultivation and realm. Qin Daoxian's current comprehension has been greatly improved compared to him in the Qi refining period, especially in the comprehension of water attribute swordsmanship. In this way, for my next trial, not only do I have to prepare enough stardust, but I also need to fully understand the space sword intent. Qin Daoxian said secretly. That's right, it is the same as the master of Jinhai Palace, who comprehends the complete spatial sword intent, not the branch sword intent of the spatial sword intent. With the background of completely mastering the 36 first-order space-class sword arts, Qin Daoxian was naturally unwilling to just comprehend the branch sword intent of the space class. At the beginning he understood the Siyu sword intent because he had no choice. Now Qin Daoxian's vision and background are completely unmatched by him at the beginning. In addition, the bounded origin orb provides him with a steady stream of comprehension stardust. As long as you have enough comprehension stardust, there is no trial you can't pass. Qin Daoxian clenched his fists and said, "Think of this." Qin Daoxian secretly calculated it. If you want to have enough comprehension stardust, you must have the Jiuan orb. Immediately, he looked in the direction of the passage of the real demon world again. However, the real demon realm is no better than this realm. It is the realm of the real demon world. Even if I have Mi Qin Fan in my hand, it is inevitable that when the gutter capsizes, I must think of a safe method. Think for a moment. Qin Daoxuan's eyes lit up. In terms of caution, the most famous person in the entire Wanxinghai is Xinjue Jinren. A mere cultivator with Jindan cultivation level can hide for 400 or 500 years before and after the arrest of Qinyuan Jianzong. Qin Daoxian couldn't help recalling Xinjue Zhenren's methods carefully. Mi Qinfan escaped for his life, the absolutely safe Xinjue Immortal Mansion and the Immortal Corpse clone. These conditions. It seems that Qin Daoxian basically has it. Mi Qinfan is now in his hands. Although the Otherworld channel is connected to the real demon world, the fellows here can only pass through the monks of the foundation building stage at most. That is to say, even if the world monsters found this passage, the high-level world monsters would not be able to come through. And the low-level world demon came over and had no use other than delivering food to Qin Daoxian. Thinking about it this way, this is an absolutely safe place. The only security risk is the clone. As for the real body to go, Qin Daoxian thought for a while but decided to give up. There are countless powerhouses in the real demon world, and among these demon masters, there must be those who can block the space. If the real body goes there and meets the demon master who can block the space, Qin Daoxian will have no way to escape. Therefore, he decided to follow the example of Xinjue and use a clone. Actually, in Wanxinghai, sacrificing avatars is not a rare secret technique. Qin Daoxian had seen this kind of secret technique in the jade slips exchanged by Qinyuan sword sect, and the price was much cheaper than various cultivation techniques. For monks, sacrifice avatars are a thing that consumes energy and resources. Few monks choose to sacrifice avatars when their cultivation is not high. Generally speaking, only those monks who have reached Jindan or even nascent soul will choose to sacrifice and refine their clones. Because they feel that the improvement of their cultivation base has encountered a bottleneck, their own potential is exhausted, and it is difficult to improve their cultivation base. Therefore, in order to pursue the enhancement of strength, such monks will try to practice various secret methods, such as the method of avatars, the secret method of double nature infants, and so on. In the final analysis, these secret methods are only time-consuming and labor-intensive sidetracking, and they are not worth mentioning for cultivators who are pursuing the Tao. For monks with low cultivation base and high potential, the foundation building period is the time to be brave and diligent. Who would choose to practice what kind of avatar at this time? Isn't that uncomfortable? If you change it to the past. Qin Daoxian also despised the secret technique of cultivating clones. After all, adding a clone will not help the cultivator's cultivation and realm in the slightest, and it will not greatly improve the cultivator's strength. For example, Qin Daoxian is now working hard to sacrifice a clone. The cultivation base of the clone cannot exceed that of the deity. Even if the avatar and the deity have the same kendo realm, their strength is not comparable to that of the deity. Even more potential. Due to the different materials of the avatars produced by the sacrifices have different potentials. Some monks use high-level treasures to sacrifice and refine, and the clone potential is very good. And some cultivators are shy, and can only use some low-level spiritual materials to make avatars. It is difficult to say that such avatars have any potential. But no matter what kind of material it is, the avatar is refined. Its potential will not exceed the deity. Because the cultivation of the clone will be restricted by the deity. This is also the reason why Xinjue couldn't exert the power of his body at all after he used the immortal corpse as a separate body for sacrifice. Qin Daoxuan's eyes narrowed, and he began to plan the next cultivation arrangement. First, use the few remaining battle exploits of the Qin family to exchange for a secret method of cultivating avatars, and then find suitable materials for cultivating avatars. After the success of the sacrifice refining clone, you can use this clone to go to the real demon world to kill the world monster and harvest the world origin beads. At the same time, the deity sits in the demon monkey mountain, and while improving his cultivation he comprehends the spatial sword intent. With Wan Xinghai's trial inheritance, Qin Daoxian finally chose to focus on the new space sword intent. Although the Siyu sword intent, which is close to the third level of sword intent, is stronger. But compared with the complete spatial sword intent, the potential of the Siyu sword intent is too low. Even if it is the complete water-traveling sword intent, its potential is difficult to compare with the space sword intent, let alone the branch sword intent of water-traveling sword intent, the Siyu sword intent. Say it again. Qin Daoxuan's Siyu sword intent has risen to the current state, mainly relying on the epiphany ability of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. But in the end, it takes 30 days for Hongmeng to comprehend the Taoist scriptures to realize a stick of incense. Qin Daoxian has practiced for more than 10 years, and the total amount of comprehension stardust stored in total is only a few thousand. Counting it, the Jiuan orb left by less than 10 base-building stage monsters is enough to generate thousands of comprehension stardust. For Qin Daoxian, who has mastered the channel of the real demon world, it is not worth mentioning at all. The chaotic energy in the Jianghu is the greatest confidence for Qin Daoxian to give up the Siyu sword intent and switch to the space sword intent. Figure out what to do next. Qin Daoxian no longer delays. Walk out of the cave and fly towards the main vein of Demon Ape Mountain. What, are you leaving? Outside Luo Ziyuan's cave. When Luo Li heard that Qin Daoxian had just opened a cave in Mo Yuan Mountain, he said goodbye. His pretty face was full of disbelief. Right. Qin Daoxian nodded. I suddenly remembered that there is still an important thing to do in the clan. Heard. Luo Li opened a small mouth of cherry, but he hesitated. Luo Shuyuan on the side bowed his hands and said solemnly, Lord, don't worry, I will personally guard this fellow of the real demon world, and I will never let a world demon cross the border. I am relieved by the words of the patriarch Luo. Qin Daoxian smiled and cupped his hands. Immediately. He looked at Luo Li again, cupped his hands and said, Miss Luo, take care. You, take care too. Luo Li said with a strong smile. Qin Daoxian nodded with a smile, then turned into a flash of light and disappeared in front of the two of them. Outside the cave. Luo Shiyun glanced at Luo Li, who wanted to wear his eyes, and sighed, Don't look, he's gone too far. I know. Luo Li reluctantly retracted his gaze and said in a low voice. Luo, forget it, he's a sword cultivator and he's the arrogant man among the human cultivators. We're just a non-human and non-monster mermaid. You and him are destined to be impossible. I know. Seeing her daughter's appearance, Luo Shiyuan didn't know how to comfort her. But he knew that by letting his daughter recognize the reality earlier, she would be less hurt. Although this decision was cruel, it was the least harmful way to Luo Li. Chapter 228. The Fairy City of Guang'an Prefecture. In front of a palace where the Zhou family resides. Qin Daoxian bowed his hands to a red-haired cultivator in the purple house in front of him, and said with a smile, Congratulations to Senior Jiang for his promotion. Heard. Zhang Yu smiled and said, What a promotion, it's just taking over from Senior Brother's class. Talking. Zhang Yu waved his hand, Fellow Daoist Qin, don't call me from Senior Jiang and Senior Jiang. With your talent, it won't take long before you can catch up with my cultivation. You and I should be friends of the same generation. Qin Daoxian nodded eloquently, Fellow Daoist Jiang, so, Ganyun Temple has now changed the residence of Zhangzhou Xianqing to Guang'an Prefecture Xianqing? That's right. Zhang Yu looked at Qin Daoxian with deep eyes and pointed out, After the last time the Yunshao Palace competed for merit, the palace master ordered me to change the residence to the immortal city of Guang'an Mansion. Speaking of which, you are the one who made great efforts, Qin Daoyu. Nah. I heard this. Qin Daoxian waved his hands again and again. I don't dare, I'm just a little shrimp in the vortex who can't help myself. Hida Hineng can make this decision for the palace master of Qinyun Palace. It's good that you have this knowledge. Zhang Yu looked around, took 2 steps forward and said in a very close tone, Brother Qin, you and I are both Zhangzhou cultivators. I would like to tell you a word of heart, brother, and I hope you don't mind. Brother Zhang, but that's what he said. Zhang Yu pondered for a moment. The battle between the 2 factions of the Qinyuan sword sect has been going on for a long time. Young cultivators like me who have no basic strength, must not rashly intervene in it. Brother Qin, you have a bright future and you should understand this truth. Looking at Zhang Ye's sincere eyes, Qin Daoxian nodded solemnly, Thank you, Brother Zhang, for your suggestion. See, Qin Daoxian listened to this advice. Zhang Yu smiled gratified and then his face returned to his businesslike appearance and said, I don't know if Daoyu Qin is looking for me this time because this time I came to Daoyu Zhang to exchange for a method of avatar. The method of avatar? Zhang Yu frowned. With Daoyu Chen's current cultivation, what is the method of finding a clone? After speaking, Zhang Yu immediately responded, Of course, if it's inconvenient to say, I didn't ask Brother Quan Dang. Hear this. Qin Daoxian laughed and said, There's nothing inconvenient, Brother Zhang should know, maybe it won't be long before we Wan Xinghai will recover Jinan Pass. Qin Daoxian said, his voice gradually disappeared. Zhang Yu is so shrewd. He was so hinted that he knew Qin Daoxuan's plan instantly, and he whispered, Brother Qin plans to send a clone to participate in the war. Why, Does Qinyuan Jianzong stipulate that you can't send clones to fight? Jianghu frowned. It's not impossible, but most of the cultivator clones are not as powerful as the deity. Besides, the battle to recover Zhenengwen is just around the corner. In such a short period of time, can you improve the strength of the clones? Brother Zhang, don't worry about it, Qin Daoxian said with a smile. Increasing the strength of a clone is, in the final analysis, a waste of resources. The clone is no better than the deity, and it has to break through the cultivation step by step. The cultivator cultivating the avatar, as long as there are enough resources, the avatar can be quickly upgraded to a level comparable to that of the deity. Hearing Qin Daoxian's inhumane words, and thinking of the massive military exploits the opponent had won in the Zhangzhou Corps Tide battle, Jianghu stopped talking. See, the atmosphere is a little dull. Qin Daoxian cupped his hands and said, by the way, Brother Zhang is responsible for the exchange of military exploits all the year round. Do you know what exquisite methods of avatars can be exchanged for Qinyuan Sword Sect? Heard. Zhang Yu laughed. You are asking the right person. Zhang Yu searched in the storage bag and then handed over a jade slip. Brother Qin, please take a look. This records all the secret techniques of my Qinyuan Sword Sect. Oh. Qin Daoxian excitedly took the jade slip and quickly checked it in front of Zhang Yu. Consciousness sinks into the jade slip. Soon, a bunch of information poured into Qin Daoxian's sea of knowledge. Of course. Although there is a lot of information pouring into Qin Daoxian's sea of consciousness, compared with his wider and wider sea of consciousness, it is still unknown. About half a stick of incense. Qin Daoxian figured out the type of secret method of Qinyuan Jianzong's clone. Qinyuan Jianzong's avatar secret methods can be roughly divided into 3 categories. The first category is the magic weapon clone. The so-called avatar is to use a high-level magic weapon as an avatar, and finally sacrifice it into a cultivator's avatar. There is one benefit to this avatar. That is, after the success of the avatar sacrifice, the cultivation base can generally be directly comparable to the deity, and can quickly gain extremely strong strength. But at the same time, there is also a disadvantage, that is, limited by the grade of the magic weapon. This kind of clone basically has no potential at all. For example, a clone made from a third-order magic weapon can only reach the cultivation level of the Zifu period at most. Even if the cultivation base of the deity is upgraded to Jindan or Nascent Soul in the future, the avatar will still be the cultivation base of Zifu, and there will be no improvement in the slightest. The second category. It is the avatar of the Lingbao class. The so-called avatars of the spiritual treasure category are to use special treasures such as various spiritual plants, spiritual materials, or spiritual roots of heaven and earth to sacrifice and refine avatars. This kind of avatar is compared to the magic weapon avatar. If you don't just succeed in the sacrifice, you will gain a very strong strength which needs to be cultivated slowly. But at the same time, the potential of the Lingbao clone is much greater than that of the magic weapon clone. In the future, if the cultivator is willing to spend enough energy and resources, he can even raise it to a level comparable to that of the cultivator. Of course, there is also a limit to this improvement. This limit is the limit of Lingbao itself. For example, a clone whose heal is the 4th order heaven and earth spiritual root, even if a monk is willing to spend a lot of energy and resources, at most it can be upgraded to the nascent soul cultivation base. But this is basically the limit. There is no chance against the sky. It is impossible to continue to break the heals and upgrade to the primordial spirit cultivation. Of course, it's hard to say whether the cultivator's deity can achieve Yuanshan, let alone a clone. Therefore, many cultivators will choose Lingbao avatars when they choose to sacrifice and refine avatars. First, Lingji and other spiritual treasures are undoubtedly much cheaper than high-level magic weapons. Second, the potential of Lingbao clones is greater than that of magic weapon clones, so they are naturally more favored by monks. The third category is the flesh and blood clone. As the name suggests, a flesh and blood clone is a clone made by using the flesh and blood of oneself or other beings. Russian Jurin's avatar, which is made by immortal corpse sacrifice, is a kind of flesh and blood avatar. Once this kind of avatar is successfully cultivated, it has the greatest potential. If the aptitude of the avatar itself is better than that of the deity, then once the sacrifice is successful, it is not the avatar that is a drag on the deity, but the deity that is a drag on the deity. Because the clone will be limited by the cultivation of the deity. For example, Shinjuezhen is a typical deity dragging down the clone. Although the flesh and blood clone has great potential, this clone also has a disadvantage, that is, it is difficult to obtain materials. After all, not everyone can go against the sky like Shinjuezhenren, and can use a corpse of an immortal to sacrifice a clone. Therefore, many monks who choose flesh and blood avatars will cut a piece of flesh and blood from themselves, supplemented by a lot of resources, and sacrificing them into avatars. Once this kind of avatar is successfully cultivated, its potential and strength are all different from the original one. These three types of avatar methods are all the avatar secret methods that Qinyuan Jianzong can exchange. After reading the introduction in Yujian, Qin Daoxian took his divine sense out of the jade slip, raised his head and said, "Brother Zhang, I choose to exchange this for Jia." Heard. Zhang Yu took the jade slip and checked it out, with an unexpected expression on his face. The secret method of avatar in 4Jia is a method of avatars of flesh and blood. Brother Qin chose this secret method of avatars, thinking that he was interested in Taizhou's secret treasure for cultivating avatars of flesh and blood. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian was slightly taken aback. The secret treasure of cultivating flesh and blood clones? Why, Brother Qin, don't you know? Zhang Yu was also stunned and immediately slapped his forehead, shook his head and laughed and said, "Don't blame Brother Qin, I did the exchange of merits in the Cloud Palace based on the cultivator's cultivation, and I forgot that Brother Qin still established the foundation." After he finished speaking, he handed over to beg for mercy again and again. See, Qin Daoxian only smiled bitterly. It seems that in Sangzhou cultivator's eyes, although Qin Daoxian is not a Zifu cultivator, he is better than a Zifu cultivator, and no one will treat him as a foundation-building cultivator. Brother Qin, let's see. With that said, Zhang Yu took out a jade slip again. Qin Daoxian took the jade slip and checked it again. Sure enough, the treasures recorded in this jade slip are much more diverse than the exchange jade slip that Qin Daoxian obtained for the first time. Moreover, most of them are treasures that can only be used by cultivators of the Zifu. This is... When Qin Daoxian saw a treasure as bright as a blood diamond, his eyes narrowed. The secret treasure he saw was nothing else, it was the blood crystal he obtained in the real demon world. Qin Daoxian didn't think much and asked casually, "Brother Zhang said that the secret treasure for cultivating flesh and blood clones refers to this kind of treasure called blood crystal? Right?" Zhang Yu nodded and said with a smile, "Blood crystals are a special product of Taizhou, which can not only cultivate flesh and blood clones, but also enhance the cultivation of cultivators. It's just that blood crystals are very precious. I heard that at the auction in Taizhou, a blood crystal can be sold for a sky-high price of more than 100,000 spirit stones, so few monks are prodigal to use it to refine their bodies. In addition, every time the blood crystal appears, it is quickly divided up by the monks in Taizhou. It is normal that you have never heard of this kind of treasure." Zhang Yu paused. If you want to cultivate a flesh and blood clone based on your own flesh and blood, you need at least 100 blood crystals, that is 10 million spirit stones. Speaking of this, Zhang Yu shook his head, stunned for Qin Daoxian's prodigal. Although Zhang Yu joined the Qinyuan Jianzong's Qinyun temple, he was born in a loose cultivator after all, and his talent couldn't compare to an arrogant cultivator like Qin Daoxian. Therefore, for Qin Daoxian, who spends tens of millions of spirit stones at every turn, in his opinion, he is simply a loser. To know. With so many spirit stones, you can basically buy a Zifu pill from the auction house. With the Purple Palace pill, it is not impossible to open up the Purple Palace, and at least there is a 50% certainty. Isn't this more cost-effective than sacrificing or refining a clone? Besides, 100 blood crystals are only a preliminary success in refining the clone. At this time, the cultivation level of the flesh and blood clone is only at the chi refining stage. If you want to upgrade it to the foundation building stage in a short period of time, you might have to smash millions of spiritual stones into it. It is so time-consuming and laborious, and it is not wise to only obtain a foundation-building combat power. But soon, Zhang Yu thought of Qin Daoxian's terrifying Kendo realm again, and couldn't help but understand why the other party wanted to sacrifice his avatar. For ordinary monks, it is meaningless to spend more than 10 million spirit stones to cultivate a clone with a foundation-building cultivation base. But for Qin Daoxian, the foundation-building avatar cultivated with more than 10 million spirit stones has the combat power of the Purple Mansion, so it cannot be said to be a disadvantage. After all, a Zifu's combat power is worth more than 10 million spirit stones. So, wouldn't it be very difficult to buy 100 blood crystals? Qin Daoxian frowned. Zhang Yu opened his mouth, not knowing how to answer. Qin Daoxian didn't say that the price was high, but he just felt that 10 million spirit stones might not necessarily be able to buy 100 blood crystals. It was so light and fluffy that he didn't take the huge sum of 10,000 spirit stones into his eyes. Jianghu felt helpless. It can't be said that it is very difficult, Jianghu frowned. If you want to buy blood crystals, in the end it depends on your luck, brother Qin. Luck. Qin Daoxian was stunned when he heard this. Buying things depends on luck, which can only prove that the supply of blood crystals is not very stable. Yes, luck, Jianghu nodded, although most of the time, blood crystals will be scrambled by Taizhou monks, but it is not absolute because Taizhou will produce a lot of blood crystals from time to time. At that time, the price of blood crystals will plummet, so whether Brother Qin can get his wish or not depends on your luck. I see. Qin Daoxian nodded clearly. Hearing these words, Qin Daoxian understood in his heart that this Taizhou must also have a passage to the real demon world, and maybe the local high-level monks in Taizhou participated in the development of the real demon world. Even there is more than one channel in the real demon world in Taizhou, otherwise they would not be able to produce so many blood crystals. To know. If the blood crystal production is scarce, it will definitely not spread. For example, Qin Daoxian has a blood crystal in his hand, which will definitely not be disclosed to the outside world. The fact that this thing can spread in Taizhou and even go to auction, proves that blood crystals in Taizhou may already have the most basic production channels. In other words, Qinyuan Jianzong is likely to have established a certain foundation on the opposite side of the Taizhou channel. Think of this. Qin Daoxian asked calmly, Brother Zhang, this blood crystal is so magical, I don't know how it was produced? Hear this. Zhang Ye's eyes flickered slightly and he shook his head and said, I don't know that very well. Brother Qin, you know that I have been on the front line of Izumo until recently, and I was recently transferred back to Cangzhou to be in charge of Cangzhou affairs. How can I know about Taizhou? What about the situation? Zhang Yu said with a ha. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian suddenly smiled. That's right, it's my brother Meng Lang. Brother Qin asked this for. Why else? Qin Daoxian said with a wry smile. I heard that blood crystals can help cultivators refine their bodies, can you not be tempted? Brother Zhang, you also know that low-level spiritual rice is less and less helpful for cultivators, while high-level spiritual rice is expensive. Hard to find. I'm thinking if there is any way to cultivate blood crystals. Hear this. Zhang Yu couldn't help laughing. He pointed at Qin Daoxian and said with a smile, Brother Qin, not to mention whether this blood crystal can be cultivated artificially, even if he can artificially cultivate it, do you think there will be a family willing to sell this cultivation method? What Brother Zhang said is very true. Qin Daoxian put on a stunned expression and cupped his hands. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.